Oh, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are just a day away from spring practice officially beginning for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, an exciting spring that we're really looking forward to. So what better way than to give you all a little bit of a preview? If you joined us yesterday for the show, you know that we heavily discussed the offensive side of the football, some key storylines to keep in mind heading into the spring. We're going to flip it over to the defensive side of the football, talk about some of the storylines that you should be keeping your eye on. We know that we certainly are, things that we want answered, questions we have, and players we're excited about, obviously heading into spring ball. So going to hit on some key storylines, also going to talk a little bit of recruiting, the second segment of the show, some key visitors, of course, during spring practice that will be on campus, 2024 recruits, 2025 targets, also some committed players that will be on campus as well over the next few days. So a lot to get into here. Of course, we'll be hitting a mailbag on the third segment of the show. So at any time during the show, if you want to hit a mailbag in the chat, put a little MB in front, really kind of helps us kind of ease along and get those questions in order. Very much appreciated. Of course, I'm the director of recruiting here at IrishBreakdown.com, Ryan Roberts, joined by Mr. Brian Driscoll, the publisher here at the site. And I know, Brian, there's exciting times, obviously, just one day away from the spring officially kicking off, talking some defensive football today. But this is one of the more fun times of the years, man. A lot of optimism in the air, new coaches ready to kind of fulfill and to see how what the 2023 season may bring, man. So how excited are you, obviously, for working through the spring here?
Well, for me, it's also a little bit, I haven't been to spring practice in a couple of years because of some policies that aren't there anymore. So I'm obviously excited about that. It'll be nice to kind of get back out and talk ball, with my own eyes of like what I see. So that'll be a lot of fun. Very much looking forward to that. It's a great time of year, Ryan. I mean, you talk about the recruiting visits are heating up. We're going to talk about a ton of kids that are going to be on campus this weekend. Spring ball's heating up. And we get to put some of that other stuff behind us, right? Like that's the thing. We get to put the coaching BS behind us. We don't have to talk about Jack Swarbrick as much because, he's not out there coaching. And, the people that are his supporters aren't out there coaching. So, we get to talk about things that are more fun. And, it's important for the team too, Ryan, but this is a really important period, the beginning a very important period for recruiting in the 24 and 25 classes as well. And we'll dive into that. I find it fascinating that there's as many, if not more, 25 kids coming on campus this weekend as there are 24 kids, which says a lot of things. So it's just a fun, but also very busy time of the year for us, certainly as we kind of wade through all of this. But I'm just looking forward to seeing the helmets back on again and for us to start talking some ball and less of that other stuff that we've had to talk about for the last several months.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some negativity for sure, but I think that this is the launch point, man. Like, players are obviously locked in, coaches are locked in from inside the program, from an outsider's perspective. Like you said, there's a lot of visitors that are going to be on campus. I mean, there's a lot of 2025 kids that are going to be here. There's one in particular that's going to be here for the 24th and the 25th. Of course, the 24th is the pro day for Notre Dame. I forgot to mention that too, right? So you're going to be having NFL scouts on site this weekend. Some general managers will for sure be on site this weekend. And they're going to be obviously, a lot of different avenues of the football world here. So there's going to be one 2025 kid in particular that's going to be here for the pro day and then for the practice the next morning. So to say that a lot of stuff is happening this weekend in South Bend is a massive understatement. I mean, the 2025 list this staff has put together is something special, to be honest, as far as the first initial visitor list that we've seen, obviously, of kids coming this weekend, 2024 kids, key targets that will be on campus as well. I'm excited to get into, obviously, the recruiting side, but, I mean, more than anything, man, just from a general sense, we love game days, obviously, covering Notre Dame football, right? And you're going to start to see what the 2023 team is going to look like. We've talked about it. This is the foundation period. This is seeing what players step up, what players take starting roles, what players really buy in to what the coaches are selling on a day-to-day basis. This is where it begins this week.
Well, that's what's so fun about this, right? This is our first chance to see what is the 23 team going to look like. And again, it's going to look a lot different on that last Saturday in August than it will today. But at least we get our first glimpse. It's our first chance to see Sam Hartman in a Notre Dame uniform. It's our first chance to see the new Notre Dame coaches in action. As you mentioned yesterday, it's our first chance to see like what the energy is like with Jared Parker as the OC. Not that it'll be better or worse. It's just going to be different. What's it going to look like? And then, of course, on defense, Ryan, that's kind of transitions us into on that side of the ball.
Yep.
What is going to be different this year? Is it just going to be more of the same? Are there going to be some adjustments? Are there going to be different players? I mean, we know Isaiah Foskey's not around anymore. The Adam Miolas aren't around anymore. There's no Brandon Joseph, no Houston Griffith, who feels like he's had been at Notre Dame like forever. There's a lot of changes, but then there's a lot of continuity from a coaching standpoint. At least from the on-field assistant coaches. Well, but there is a new GA in Max Bullough. Well, he, for all intents and purposes, the linebackers coach, even though he's just a graduate assistant, I say with air quotes, because graduate assistant's how they got him on the staff. Just like James Laurinaitis last year, right or wrong, the reality is Al Golden has made them the de facto linebacker coach. What's that going to look like? So there's just so many interesting aspects of it. Who steps up, right? This happens all the time. You lose Julian Aguara and Khalid Kareem, two excellent defensive ends, and then bam, Dalen Hayes and Adi Tagumba Ogundeji step up. They depart, and then bam, Isaiah Foskey breaks out, right? Like that's what the good teams do. You lose players. They're tough losses. You don't really know how they're going to be replaced. Then you come out in the spring, you start to get a sense of, oh, that's how they're going to be replaced. Or hopefully you feel that way by the end of the spring. And that's what I'm looking forward to, right? It's getting answers to those questions and finding out, what that's going to be like and what are the themes that we're going to discuss. And, for me, it really starts with the coaching. And Al Golden had a quality defense last year. Wasn't bad, definitely wasn't great. In some areas, it was graded out really high. The passing yards allowed, yards per attempt was pretty good. The overall total defense was pretty good. Yards per play, middle of the road. Third down, middle of the road. Rushing, about on par with what it's been. Didn't get a whole lot better. Red zone, terrible. There's a lot of things that you look at, but then you kind of watch and you're like, yeah, I know the results were good, but you're just watching a play and you're like, man, they make a lot of mistakes, right? How do they get those things cleaned up? So that's my big thing is, my number one storyline is what's Al Golden going to do different? Every single coach, every single one should look at his team and say, how can we get better?
Right.
And the answer is never, well, we're year 2 in the system, so we'll naturally be better. Just keep doing what we're doing. No, I don't think anyone should look at that. Georgia shouldn't look at that. You say, okay, we did really well here. Let's keep that rolling. We weren't good here. How can we make it better? How can we adjust our practice plan to make it better? How can we change our teaching instruction on tackling to make sure we're tackling better? How do we do things from a practice and preparation standpoint to make sure our linebackers are more consistent with their execution, that our defensive linemen are using their hands better, that our safeties are taking better angles to the football and coverage, all those type of things that need to be improved from this football team. What do they do to address those things in practice? And then, of course, is he willing to make any schematic changes, or is it just, well, they're going to do better with it this year because they're in year 2? I don't know the answer to those questions. I know what I want the answers to be, but I don't know. And that's really where, when you talk about the key storylines, Ryan, that's going to be the key one. That's going to be the main theme for me throughout the entire spring.
And yesterday when we did the offensive side of the football, we talked about a lot of the coaches to start the show too, where it's like, this is there's a couple holdovers, obviously, from the 2022 season with D'Lo McCullough, Chancey Stuckey, and then obviously Jared Parker's technically a holdover, but he's in a completely different position. You're bringing in a new quarterback coach. You're bringing in a new offensive line coach. So there's going to be a new energy around that side of the football. It is a completely different conversation from the offensive side of the football, though, to the defensive side of the football. Because the one thing about the offensive side of the football, especially with Coach Parker taking over as the offense coordinator, you don't have the answers to those questions. Everything's an unknown, right? Like the unknown is that, is whether there's going to be a different energy, what the format of the practices are going to look like offensively. There's a lot of question marks as far as what exactly we're going to see. Defensive side of the football, you have a more known commodity. We had a spring last year where, although a limited basis, we were able to see a little bit of how the defense ran practice, what Al Golden likes to do as far as, just kind of the tempo of a practice. All those things are known commodities. The biggest question mark for me on that side of the ball is, what is the maturation? I'm not talking about maturation of players. That's a natural thing, right? What does a player do going from freshman to sophomore year, junior to senior year, and anywhere in between? I want to see if there is a little bit of self-identity understood this offseason of like, hey, we need to do this better. This really worked for us well. We need to hone in on that maybe even a little bit more. There are certain identities on the defensive side of the football. I'm just interested to see if it stays consistent from one spring to the next, or if there is a little bit of a changing of understanding of this team, right? Like, do we need to function a little bit differently? Do we need to focus on certain areas over the other? Do we really need to hone in on some strengths that we have on the defensive side of the football? So there's more of a known commodity defensively, but I think that in my opinion, if you see a little bit of maybe a difference of structure, a difference of energy, just slight differences, I think can make all the difference for this team, because it's not a lack of football know-how, right? Like Al Golden knows the game of football. All these defensive coaches on Notre Dame staff know defensive football. We know this, right? They wouldn't be in the position they are if they don't. But the key here is understanding what went well last year and what didn't go well, what needs to be improved, what needs to take a step forward. So natural maturation of the defensive side of the football with so much rollover. I mean, you mentioned Max Bulla. That's really the only major difference on this defensive coaching staff from last year. Everybody else came back and is intact. So what does it look like from one spring to the next? How much change is there from what we saw from this team last spring, last fall, and then now what it's going to look like heading into 2023?
So obviously we'll be keeping an eye on what we see from a practice structure, and if there's any schematic changes, which I doubt we'll see really any schematic changes, Ryan, just because we're only going to see one full practice. I don't think we're going to really notice that. Most of the periods we'll see will be like individual stuff, like tackling drills, one-on-ones, things like that. We won't see a lot of that, but I'm curious to it's more of like, what are we going to hear? What are the coaches going to say? Are they going to say the right things? Are they going to do the right things? We'll find out. We'll find out. But that's something that's true for every coach. I mean, Georgia just won the national championship. Well, guess what? They're going to have different personnel this year at a lot of spots. They're not going to have the same number 2 tight end that they had last year. That's going to alter what their 12 personnel looks like. They're going to have a different quarterback this year. They're not going to have a 30-year-old quarterback this year. So, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do there. They lose a great tackle in Broderick Jones. They lose Jalen Carter. So their team's going to look different. So they've got to adjust. They got to adapt to the personnel that they have. And that's why I constantly harp on this all the time, Ryan. You watch Georgia's defense in 2022, it was still very good, but they did some things differently than they did the year before because their personnel was different. Same thing offensively. They were a different team today than they were in 2017. They've adapted their personnel. They've adapted to what they can do. And those are the things that I'm looking forward to doing. Are they going to adapt to the personnel, or is it just this is our scheme and it's up to the players to fit it? I'm not saying they will do that. I'm saying that's the question that you have for a lot of teams heading into this spring. The second one, Ryan, to me is defensive line. I mean, that's a big one for me because we have kind of a threefold kind of look here, right? Number one is the position battles that you and I discussed the other day. Who's going to emerge at the Vipers? Who Jordan Patel we expect to be the starter, but who steps up and has a good spring to say, hey, I need to play as well. And then that impacts your third down defense. That could really impact who you're going to have on third down. Where does Javonte Jean-Baptiste play? I expect him to be a big end. I keep being told he's going to be a big end. Do they end up moving him to Viper for some reason? What would cause that potential move? Would it be somebody stepping up? Is it an injury? Who knows? Who steps up behind the interior defensive lineman? Those are going to be question marks. Where's the beef going to come from? Are they going to really push to get Gabriel Rubio and Aiden Kana ready to go? Does somebody kind of break out that not a lot of people are talking about? Not a lot of people talk about Jason Onye, right? It's the veterans, and then it's like the rising sophomores, the young guys like Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobira, who I can't wait to see those guys this spring. I can't wait to see what the rising sophomore class looks like. But then we kind of forget about the Jason Onyes that kind of break out and in some years and become really important parts of the rotation. Does that happen this year? Those are all questions that I'm curious to see, Ryan, and to see who steps up, who develops. Does Nana take the leadership we've seen from him in various videos and things we've heard in the weight room and other things and carry that into better production? I don't know. Does the light go on for Alexander Ahrensberger? And those are two veterans that I'm very curious to see if they can make their presence felt this year. It's a big spring for those two guys. That's Jason Onye and Alexander Ahrensberger.
Yep.
If they don't have big springs, they're going to get passed up. If they have big springs, Ryan, those are two of the most naturally gifted veterans that they have.
Yeah.
You know, Jason Onye's, I've told he's up to almost 290 pounds now. And he's over 285. He's 6'4". He's got long arms. Right, he's a pretty athletic kid. Remember, he went to Bishop Hendricken in Rhode Island, right, to play basketball. Reminds me a lot of the kid that you were talking about from Illinois, Chris Burgess. Does the light go on for him or not? I don't know.
Right.
Does the light go on for Alexander Ahrensberger? I don't know. If it does, it's going to be fun to watch. If it doesn't, then okay, who are the young guys that pass them up? Those are all the fun parts about this, Ryan. But when we look at the D line, those are really the things that I'm going to be focused on. Is the Viper position, how does the big end position shake out, and who really pushes? I hope it's a great battle. I hope the most fierce battle of the entire spring on either side of the ball is for those guys fighting to get into the rotation at defensive tackle. That's what I hope, because if that's true, Ryan, then this defense is going to have a shot to be pretty good.
Well, and I feel like there's, some people are down on what the potential of the defensive line is in 2023 in general. I think I hear a lot of people that just kind of say you need more talent up front and you need to, be better. And there's not a lot of talent just kind of coming back. And I'm just like, yes, defensive line is a position where you always need to improve, right? Like that's a key aspect of your football team. But I look at that defensive line, I'm just like, there's a lot of talent there, man. We've talked about Joshua Burnham a ton, right? Like if you can't get the most out of Joshua Burnham, that's not a Joshua Burnham thing. It's right. Not at the end of the day. The cool part is I feel like the guys, the veterans that we're talking about, will need to have big springs or could potentially get passed up. Usually in most years, Brian, are like not as physically gifted as the young underclassmen, right? So you're like, that's why they're going to get passed up if they don't really take an opportunity to break out in the spring. This year, I look at guys like Jason Onye and Alexander Ahrensberger. I'm like, those kids are talented. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, they're not getting passed up because they lack talent. I mean, Alexander Ahrensberger is almost 6'7", 255 pounds, length, explosiveness. He's talented. Jason Onye, you already mentioned, is talented. It's just about development, honestly, for me. It's like, do you get the most out of those kids? Do the young guys, do you get the most out of them? I mean, we keep talking about Joshua Burnham being this freak athlete, which he is, but is he going to be put into a opportunity to make a big play? Is he going to be developed properly? Those things I have questions about, because there's a lot of talent up front defensively. Javonte Jean-Baptiste and obviously Riley Mills and Howard Cross too, they bring back a lot of in-game experience. But there's a lot of players on this defensive line specifically that don't bring back a lot of on-field experience. I mean, like, I expect Jordan Botelho to have a huge season, but he doesn't have like the most on-field experience of all time, especially for a kid that's going into his fourth year, obviously, right? So he's a little bit of a question mark. Joshua Burnham barely played last year, other than a couple of mop-up duty opportunities as a true freshman. Aiden Gabira had very limited opportunities in mop-up duties last year. Those guys are going into an opportunity where this spring, it's open for them to create their niche, create their impact. And I expect them to get opportunities to play, because ultimately there are no Isaiah Foskey's coming back, right? The Adamalola twins are gone after this past season as well. So there's holes to be filled. And I expect a lot of young guys to really take that opportunity and run with it. Will it be enough to turn it into a championship level defensive line? I have no idea, right? But I think the key in the spring is to see that growth start to mature, right? To see Joshua Burnham flash day in and day out, be consistent. To see a guy like Jason Onye be more consistent on a day-to-day basis. To see guys really start to carve out a niche into this offense going into the rest of the offseason. I'm really excited to see these young defensive linemen that are on the roster for Notre Dame.
How they perform, Ryan, is going to have an impact on the linebackers. Like, look, here's the deal. Yes, there are things the coaches need to do to get more from the linebackers. There are things that the linebackers need to do to get more production from the linebackers, right? It's a two-way street there. There's a third piece to this, and that is if the D-line is more impactful and more productive, especially being more disruptive against the run game, Ryan, that then makes it better for linebackers. I mean, you watch a lot of football. You're a linebacker. when you're making in college football, if you're making a lot of tackles for loss, like 10 plus tackles for loss, there's two reasons. Number one is, well, three reasons. Obviously, you have talent and some instincts. Number two is there's scheme that allows you to attack downhill, run stunts, run pressures, blitzes, things like that. The third one is you have a defensive line that gets great penetration, whether that's getting a push, like pushing a guy back, or shooting gaps, or getting offensive linemen to turn their hips, because the best thing for a defense to do is get the running back to make his cut, whether his insertion into the line, as far back as possible. When a running back can stay on his track, whether it's inside hip of the guard, inside hip of the tackle, whatever the case may be, A gap weak, whatever, the longer he can stay on his track, the better it is for the back. The minute that a back has to declare 3, 4, 5 yards behind line of scrimmage where he's going, now all of a sudden what you see is him cutting back off of a defensive tackle who gets a penetration, 3 technique. It's a great penetration. Back has to cut back, and then bam, your will linebacker's blowing him up in the backfield. Right? I mean, that's part of it as well. Now, the D tackle gets no stats on that play, but he began what led to them making that tackle for loss. So that's the other thing too, is the defensive line has to be more productive than it was last year. That's partly my concern, Ryan, is because you need better production despite losing 3 veteran players. My optimism comes from, yes, it's inexperienced. Yes, there's some youth, but I would argue that they have a chance to be even more athletic on the defensive line this year than they were the last 2 years. They're not losing any athleticism with Isaiah Foskey losing. Isaiah is an outstanding athlete, as we saw at the combine for his size. But the guys behind him are also outstanding athletes. You may be losing a little bit of length at the starting position, but you're not losing any athleticism. You're more athletic now at big end with Javonte Jean-Baptiste stepping into the conversation. And then you're more athletic inside by moving Riley Mills into the 3 technique. So you're not losing athleticism, you're losing experience. And now some of your more twitchy players are now going into year 2 and 3. Jason Onye, Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka, Tyson Ford, Aiden Gobira. How many of those guys? Donovan Heinisch. I always forget Donovan Heinisch, but I shouldn't. He's a good football player. I've heard some really good things about what he's doing. So which of those guys really step up? That's going to be a question, because not all of them will. That's just unrealistic. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's not going to step up and perform well. Somebody's not going to mesh with the coaches. That happens everywhere, every year. That's not an insult at the coach. Ryan, that always happens. There's all that everywhere. So, but the more of those guys to step up, the better.
Yep.
And then we get to linebacker. And I know that you've been wanting to talk about this. I thought about putting this 5th just to torment you, but we're going to kind of go front to back. Biggest question for me is not even, will the production be better? I'm a process guy, Ryan, right? Not an end game guy. The process will take care of the end game. Will there be a legitimate competition this spring at linebacker? That's my question, because I feel like if there is a legitimate competition at linebacker, and I'm talking all 3 spots, although the reality is I don't see anybody challenging J.D. Bertrand. But if they genuinely open up the competition this spring and really make the veterans work to keep their jobs, even if all 3 of the guys who started last year start in 2023, they're going to be much better at linebacker if there's a real competition, in my opinion. And that, for me, is the biggest question mark / storyline of the entire spring from a linebacker standpoint. It's not specific players. It's, will there be an honest competition at linebacker? Because if there is, man, I start getting excited about what this linebacker core could be, because as you said before, there's never been a talent problem, right? I'm not saying to have a bunch of first-round draft picks, but to have a really good college defense, there's the talent there to do that. It's just the production and the level of play wasn't there. They open up the competition, Ryan. I don't see how. Again, real competition, meaning they let the winner, whoever plays the best and does the best job, and do all that starts. If it's a freshman, if it's a sophomore, if it's junior, if it's senior, 5th year, whatever. If it's a real competition, I have no doubt the linebacker position is going to make tremendous strides next year.
It's such a unique blend of linebackers on this group. I mean, you have technically your 3, well, you don't have technically, you have your 3 starters returning from 2022. You have Maris Loifal coming back at will linebacker. You have J.D. Bertrand at Mike. You have Rover with Jack Kaiser coming back as well. But as we all saw in 2022, linebacker position needs to get better, needs to get more productive, needs to become more consistent on a game-to-game basis. I mean, there were some games where linebackers played really well. Like I think back to North Carolina, like they played really well in North Carolina game. They played really well in the Clemson game. But then there were far too many games where you're just like, I don't really know what that linebacker was doing on that play, right? Like I think it was the USC game with Maris Loifow, where I'm just like, I genuinely don't know what he was doing on the goal line there. I have no idea what he was doing. And there were far too many of those moments last year, far too many. And it's maddening when you consider, because we've talked about this a ton, Notre Dame has recruited the linebacker position as well as anybody the last 2 years. I mean, you get that four-man haul in 2022. And again, I know Joshua Burnham and Julian Tuliamaka are playing Viper now, but you still have Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed, and you followed that up with Preston Zinter, Jay Nosberry, Drake Bowen, who are all early enrollees, by the way. So you have a lot of dudes on this roster that have talent. And I don't want this to be like shade for a second, because I feel like some people think that the trio of J.D. Bertrand, Maris Loifow, and Jack Kaiser aren't talented as well. Like there might be more talented guys behind you, but that doesn't mean that you don't have talent either, right? Like can we just kind of get rid of that conversation piece? But ultimately, Brian, like I'm very interested because you saw that it felt like there was a push against letting some of the young guys learn on the job a little bit last year, excuse me. This year coming up, that conversation's out the window, right? Because they had the year in the weight room. They had the year of maturation, learning the system, all that great stuff, right? So you go into the spring, and it should be an open opportunity for guys like Nolan Ziegler, Jalen Sneed, etc., to get their opportunity to push for playing time. That should be the end goal this spring, is to push. Will it happen? I have no idea. I'm very interested in seeing the Max Bula conversation into this one, though, because ultimately Al Golan's going to decide who plays and who starts and all that great stuff. But there is going to be a different voice in that room, which gives me just thoughts, like it's thought-provoking, I think, to just know that there's a new voice in that linebacker room. So will things change? I have no idea. But at the end of the day, if things aren't better than what they were last year, there needs to be some type of change. There has to be. And I think that starts, to your point, of making the returning starters feel uncomfortable. I want Maris Loifow to feel uncomfortable this spring. I want JD to feel uncomfortable. I want Jack to feel uncomfortable. Make them feel uncomfortable because they know that the guys behind them might get a legit chance to get some burn. They might get a legit chance to earn that starting role. Make them uncomfortable, and that makes everybody around them better.
For me, Ryan, I think, you nailed it, man. If they have to legitimately battle for their job and have to win their job, and they do, then I'm good at linebacker. I'm good. Jack Kaiser's a good football player if used correctly. Maris Loifow is a athletic football player. I won't say he's a good football player because he's never shown himself to be a good football player. He's always shown himself to be a really athletic football player. If the light goes on for him, he's really talented. If it doesn't go on for him, then they need to find somebody else. I mean, it's as simple as that, Ryan. This isn't an anti-Maris thing. You were as big on Maris Loifow last year as anybody outside his direct family. You know what I mean? Like, extremely high on him. And it's not like, I was wrong. He's not talented. He is talented, Ryan. He's just undisciplined and inconsistent and doesn't look natural playing football. He just doesn't. We also, who we made similar comments about after 4 years of college? Asmar Bilal. And they worked with him, and they opened up the competition. They developed him. They spent time with him. And then as a fifth-year senior, Asmar goes out there and has 79 tackles and 10 tackles for loss on a decent 2019 defense. I mean, that linebacking core was pretty good in 2019, in my opinion. That wasn't the issue that Notre Dame had in 2019. They had other issues. Linebacking core was pretty good. So will that be similar for Marist? I don't know. But if it's not, they need to put somebody else in there because to your point, Ryan, there's way too much talent on this depth chart. There's way too much God-given ability in this depth chart for you to be throwing out veterans just because they know the defense.
Especially in the transfer portal era, man, where it's so easy for a guy to leave, especially like and this is just speculation on my part. Like, I don't have this information, right? But if I'm Jalen Sneed, Brian, and I go into this spring here and as a year 2 player, and if nothing gets better and I don't get a legitimate opportunity, right? Like, why would I stay? Like, why would I stay if I'm not going to get a legitimate chance
That's the thing.
here? Yeah.
Guys will stay if they feel like they were given a legitimate shot, but somebody just was better than they were. Kids will deal with that. They will.
Yeah.
What kids won't embrace is, I don't feel like I was given a fair shot. Like, I've used this example at cornerback. I've talked to some people associated with some of the older corners that got passed up by Benjamin Morrison. Not one of them complained about it. Now, were they happy they weren't playing? No, kids want to play. You want competitive players, but they got it because they're like, that guy's a straight dude, and I'm still being coached. This coach is still working with me. He's still pushing me. He's still trying to get me better. And I know that my time will come. The thought being, well, he's probably gone in 2 years. So you're talking about Benjamin Morrison. Cam's going to be gone in a year. Benjamin's going to be gone in a couple years. If I keep pushing out, my time will come, because they feel like they were given a chance. Somebody was just better. You see that all the time. When it's like, dude, I'm out here doing everything you asked me to do. I'm making plays. Everybody knows I'm better than this guy, but you keep playing that guy because, and that was what happened with Joe Schmidt, and no disrespect to Joe Schmidt, but Ger Martini and Alex Morgan, those guys watching, like, dude, this guy, like, how do you go through an entire game against Clemson where they threw for 90 some yards in the rain, and your middle linebacker literally makes zero tackles, tackles, And so it's those things. And that's where you become disenchanted with the staff. That's where problems come about in the locker room. Yep. But if kids are given a legitimate chance and they just get beat out by another player, they won't be happy, but they'll live with it.
Sure.
And that's going to be the key. And you will gain more respect from your players. That's going to be the key. And we're not saying that Al Golden's not going to open up the competition. That's why it's a storyline. It's how is it going to be? And if he does open it up, does one of those young guys emerge? Because here's the thing, Ryan. Here's the other side of this. What if they do open it up, but the young guys just don't play well?
Right.
And they don't push the veterans. They're making a lot of mistakes. They're not doing what they need to do. Well, there you go too. Then all of a sudden, maybe we're not feeling better about it. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I would say a similar thing at safety, Ryan. Right? Like, we know who's going to play for them, at least in the top 3. But is it, of that 3, we're talking Xavier Watts, Ramon Henderson, and DJ Brown, who's the starters? Who plays the most snaps? Is it an evenly divided thing between the 3? Does somebody else step up? Does Justin Walters make a jump? Do they finally do what they should have done last year and move Clarence Lewis to safety? Does Ben Minich make a run this spring as an early enrollee? Safety is another one that I'm curious about, Ryan, because I feel the same way at safety. Does Thomas Harper just play pure nickel, or does he also play some safety? How are they going to utilize him at the safety depth chart, if at all? That's another interesting one that I'm curious to see how it shakes out this spring, Ryan, because if Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts make it a no-brainer that DJ Brown needs to come off the bench, then I'm really like where they're at safety. It could be their best safety. It has a chance, and again, this is a long way from here to getting there. But there's an opportunity based on just God-given ability that this could be the best 1-2 punch of safety that Notre Dame has had, 1-2, since 2018 with Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott. So it's going to be fun to see how it shakes out.
And it's very dependent on breakouts, obviously, right? Like Notre Dame fans all know about Xavier Watts and Ramon Henderson because you've seen flashes of it, right? Like, I mean, you remember when Ramon Henderson made the switch to safety from cornerback a couple years ago, and he had like that rangy interception against what was Virginia, right? Where he kind of came over the top and made that great play.
He also had that great tackle for loss off the edge. Remember, he blitzed off the edge and blew a running back up in the back. In the back. I think that was his first or second game playing safety, Ryan, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, you've had the spurts and the flashes of a Ramon Henderson already over the last couple of years since moving to safety. You had the flashes down the stretch of Xavier Watts. I mean, against USC specifically, like he looks like he was a potential dude going into
Both
this
USCs.
offseason. Yeah, true. Yeah, South Carolina as well. So you have both those guys who Notre Dame fans know, Notre Dame fans have seen, but now it's from flashes to every down production. Can you get there, right? Like that's a big question mark, and I am very high on Xavier Watts. I think that Xavier Watts has the potential to be a difference maker on the back end for Notre Dame in 2023. But, I mean, he was a guy that was kind of going back and forth between the wide receiver safety conversation, and then he really just started hitting his spurts down the stretch of the season this past year. So can he use that momentum down the stretch and really take hold of a safety spot this offseason and really just go get running with it, man? Because he has the opportunity to take that momentum and continue to build off of it. Ramon Henderson has a chance to do so as well. I mean, because I think for me, Brian, like DJ Brown coming back, DJ Brown is really good insurance, right? He's good insurance and he's dependable. We know that there's a little bit of a cap on how good that DJ Brown can be, though, because he's not the greatest athlete of all time.
Which is why he led the team in missed tackles last year, because you get him in space and he's going to have a tougher time. That's just no doubt.
And he's a player, though, that if he is the third or fourth safety on your roster and he can give you some snaps and he can be a leader and he do all that type of stuff, that's great. That's the type of player that a lot of programs need in a guy like a DJ Brown, right? And to bring that kind of baseline and that type of floor to the game. But I honestly think that it's very troubling if you leave the spring and then head into the fall with DJ Brown as kind of the foregone conclusion at safety. Like that is bad news for Notre Dame. It is, because that means one of the other two guys that we talked about didn't take a step forward. And that is that's my biggest worry, honestly, at the safety position is I think that in an ideal world, you leave the spring and you're like, yep, Xavier Watts and Ramon Henderson are going to be the starters going into the fall. Like they are. DJ Brown, solid player, going to give us really nice depth, going to be able to work in when we need him to and fill a role just fine. And then after that, it's about, can Ben Minich keep taking a step forward? Can Justin Walters take a step forward? Can Adon Schuler, although limited obviously in the spring coming back from the shoulder, can he mentally get some nice stuff out of the spring and be able to kind of see the game and then hopefully come back into the fall practice and be ready to go, obviously, physically, right? So there's a lot of storylines there. But for me, Brian, it starts with those two guys up top. You really are going to depend on Xavier Watts or Ramon Henderson to be guys for you going into this offseason. And if they are, you're in a really good spot. And if they both take a step forward, you feel really good about it. But if one doesn't take a step forward or none doesn't take a step forward, then we're talking about safety maybe being a little bit of trouble going into the fall.
I don't know if I would go quite there with you, Ryan, because these are the three guys that were basically playing safety last year at the end of the year. And so I feel like at least you're not going to be any worse than you were last year. I mean, because when Brandon Joseph, he didn't even play all the time. He didn't play the second half of the year when the defense was playing its best ball. When he did play, he was wildly inconsistent. Houston Griffith was just kind of steady. I don't know if I'd say they're going to be in trouble. I just don't think they're going to get better. And what does that mean? It means in the 2 or 3 games where you're actually facing athletes that are on your level or better, you're going to have some problems. And we saw that in the second half against Ohio State, where the safeties couldn't make the impact plays on the sidelines. They couldn't make the impact plays in the run game. We saw that against USC, where the safeties didn't make, had missed chances. I mean, we kind of joke about Xavier Watts coming off the hash and breaking up that pass, but the reality is, Ryan, he should have picked that off. If he takes a better angle, he's got to pick that off. Ramon Henderson, for example, the thing for him is, right, he's, to me, the key to this whole thing. He really is. Because DJ is what he is. He's a solid football player that's made some good plays in Notre Dame and has been in situations where he's, his lack of athleticism has hurt him a little bit. Xavier Watts flash. It's probably wrong of me, but I have like this just kind of assumption that Xavier Watts is going to be really good this year. I'm not worried about him at all. Ramon's the wild card for me because you nailed it early, Ryan. There are flashes where you're like, yo, if we can get that dude on a consistent basis, that's a good football player.
Sure.
But then there's other snaps where you're like, does this guy have any idea what he's doing in coverage right now? Like, I don't know what he's doing right now. Why is he giving up completion rate of like 80% in coverage? Like, that's got to get better.
We're literally we're one offseason from the conversation all offseason last year, Brian, was especially in the spring with Brandon Joseph coming in, was Brandon Joseph and Ramon Henderson are going to be the starting safeties. They're going to be the impact players. Like, we're literally one offseason removed from Ramon Henderson being the guy last year potentially. So we've had kind of this conversation piece in back-to-back years now where we're like, is this Ramon's time? Is this Ramon's time? Is it going to happen? I mean, because the kid athletically is talented. There's no doubt.
Sure.
He has some length. He's a good athlete. He can move. He has range on the back end. He's
the
pretty good
only
as a
safety
blitzer.
Ever be allowed to blitz? Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
I mean, he has a lot of attributes that you look at and say, versatility-wise, he can provide a lot to a defense on the back end. But this is the second offseason in a row now where we're saying Ramon could be a breakout. He could be a breakout. At some point, he needs to break out or it's not going to happen.
Because right now, Ryan, he's a really good athlete that's not a really good football player.
Agree.
He needs to become a really good football player. And that's going to be the question. Like, DJ Brown is actually a pretty good football player. He's just limited athletically. Yeah. That's when DJ gets in trouble, is just when he's in situations where he's just outmatched athletically. If you could put DJ's feel for the game into Ramon's athletic body, you've got a heck of a player.
Yep.
I think that's the thing, is does the light go on for Ramon this autumn? And we've now used that expression. I've now used that expression 4 times now. But that's what's so fun about the spring, because you could see it, right? Like, we didn't see Miles Boykin break out in the 2018 fall. We saw Miles break out in the 2018 spring when he absolutely abused Troy Pride and Julian Love, especially Julian Love, all spring. I mean, just all spring, we watched Miles just abuse him. You're like, okay, that guy's going to be pretty good this year. But it was one of those things, Ryan, where, the light kind of just went on against LSU. He didn't do a whole lot during the regular season, comes out in that game. You're at Cam Smith's out. Freddie Canteen had been out. Chase Claypool was out. He missed that. And then Equinemi St. Brown gets hurt in the first half. And then all of a sudden you're like, you got Michael Young, Chris Fink, and Mike and Chase and Miles Boykin. That's about all you have left healthy in the second half. Somebody's got to step up. Well, you know what? Miles stepped up in that game and then carried that over into the fall. That's kind of what I'm expecting to see from Xavier Watts. He kind of broke out late in the year, and I expect it. But does Ramon Henderson have that spring light went on moment? Does it happen for Burnham? Does it happen for Onye? Does it happen for Maris? Does it happen for Jalen Sneed? Does it happen for Nolan Ziegler? Does it happen? We could go down this list. And the more answers that are yes, the better this defense is going to be.
Sure.
That's the reality of it. Because I don't think the safety position is going to be bad this year unless guys take a step back. Because, again, we've seen this 3-man rotation in action. They weren't the problem against USC. They weren't the problem against South Carolina. Matter of fact, the safeties made some plays in that game. They can at least be solid, but you don't win a championship with solid safeties. That's the thing. So that's the standard. The standard is, can you play well enough to be part of a championship caliber defense? They didn't play that way last year. So Now, are they in trouble as if this is a liability? I don't think they're a liability. But if you got a bunch of positions that aren't a liability, they're just solid, guess what, Ryan? You don't have a championship defense.
Right.
You've got to be better than that. And that's the question mark for me. And I think Ramon is going to be the key to that. Because if Xavier breaks out and Ramon doesn't, then you're going to have to put DJ Brown on the field more. Look, DJ Brown played over 500 snaps last year. That I don't necessarily want to see that again. And this is no shot on DJ Brown. DJ Brown gives you great leadership. He gives you great effort. He's a smart kid. But the reality is he should not be playing almost 200 more snaps than Ramon Henderson. Just shouldn't.
Right.
Now, Ramon didn't earn more snaps last year. I don't fault them for playing DJ, because with Ramon, he wasn't going to get beat in space like DJ was. But you know what? He wasn't going to completely whiff on a coverage. Completely blow a coverage. DJ wasn't going to do that. That was the concern with Ramon. If Ramon can figure it out and those snap numbers get reversed, where it's Ramon that's got 504 snaps and it's DJ that's got 319 snaps, I feel really good, as long as it's not injury related.
Right.
I feel really good about where the safety position is going to be, because it could be a strength, Ryan. I don't know that it is. But this whole conversation, the issue is there's a very thin margin for error at safety. We're hoping that the light finally goes on for Ramon Henderson. But this conversation that you and I just had is exactly why Clarence Lewis needs to move to safety. It is because you can't be in a situation where you realize halfway through fall camp, well, the light hasn't gone on for Ramon. What are you going to do now? You missed 30 practice opportunities to get Clarence Lewis ready to play that position as well. And if Clarence steps up and plays well, and Ramon steps up and plays well, then now all of a sudden with Clarence Lewis, you have a Swiss Army knife that can play corner, can play nickel, can play safety. it's a great problem to have. And Ramon and Xavier are dudes, and now DJ is a nice rotation player that gives you leadership and all that veteran presence. That's the ideal situation for me, to be honest with you, Ryan, because I don't know if you can really say that there's a legitimate competition at both safety spots when there's not enough guys to push at each spot. There's one guy right now at safety that's pushing for 2 spots behind Ramon and Xavier. That's it. So it's not like linebacker. You move Clarence there, and all of a sudden, hey, you're not moving Clarence Lewis to sit the bench, Ryan. You're not. You're moving Clarence to have a shot start. All of a sudden, what you talked about at linebacker now becomes true at safety. And I don't think that hurts the defense at all.
Well, and I think that for me too, the other side of it is you also need to protect yourself with competitive depth too, right? It's like one of those situations where, I mean, God forbid something happens to a Xavier Watts or a Ramon Henderson in the spring and they're out for a substantial amount of time. It's like, where's now your impact players? Like there's not like there might just be, and yeah, Brandon, I know Brandon hit it in the chat there. If there's 1 or 2 injuries, they're in trouble. And I agree, Brandon, like you're in a situation where you might have one potential impact safety if there's an injury, but do you have another one that is serviceable? Do you have another one that is just a good contributor? Like it just gets really murky in that conversation. I think the other part too is the reason I think Xavier Watts breaking out and becoming that type of guy too, Brian, is like the one thing that I think is missing with this defense consistently is some juice on multiple levels, right? A guy that kind of, plays their hair on fire and kind of brings that competitive toughness, and a guy that guys I think could gravitate towards. I think that could be Xavier Watts in this defense. Like if he takes a step forward and if he's like one of the guys on the defensive side of the football, he's got a little bit of that swagger to him where you're like, I'll follow that guy, right? Like I'll follow that guy. I'm not sure if you have a guy in the front 7 right now that is for sure that guy, maybe outside of Jordan Botelho. Like that's the only guy that brings that energy type of thing where you're like, yeah, that guy's like, he can get his juice
almost
ready
an
to
edge.
go.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, of the guys that played last year, I would agree with you for sure. Riley Mills can be that guy at times, but the problem is Riley doesn't make enough plays and consistently enough to be that guy. When he does, he plays with fire, he plays with energy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. And that's it's going to be interesting and very fascinating. Last key, Ryan, as we wrap this up. We got to see something this spring that tells us they're addressing the red zone issue.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about, okay, what does Notre Dame need to do to get better? I mean, there's no bigger area on the entire team than red zone defense. Let me give you some numbers, Ryan, okay? Last year, Notre Dame ranked 39th in scoring defense. That's their lowest ranking on scoring defense since 2016, right? That's just a fact. It's their lowest ranking from a scoring defense standpoint since 2019. So you look at that and say, well, okay, you had a couple situations where, you gave up some offensive touchdown. I get all that, but that happens to every team. Every team has couple plays like that, right? So if you look at it and you consider that Notre Dame ranked 130th out of 131 teams in red zone defense, and they ranked dead last, 131st last year in red zone defense, like that more, if nothing else gets fixed and you fix that, you're a much better defense. And I'm gonna back it up with numbers, Ryan. Okay, so this is what I wrote the other day. If Notre Dame kept everything the same and simply improved from dead last to 70th in red zone touchdown defense, they right now shave 2 whole points off their point per game average and jump from 39th to 25th. Okay, if they make that same improvement, and that's assuming that every single red zone stop ends in a field goal, so you still give up, you're still 130th out of 130 in total red zone defense, but you get better just in red zone touchdown defense. So every one gets turned into a field goal. You take 2 points off and you jump up to 25th in scoring defense. If you make those same stops and you simply give up field goals on half of those possessions, which doesn't raise them up way, way high in red zone defense, they're still low, but you all of a sudden jump up now, Ryan, to 19th nationally in scoring defense. And if Notre Dame can jump up and become just a top 20 red zone defense, which they were the year before. Well, here, I'll give you this stat. I won't go through the whole thing. I'll give you this stat. If Notre Dame simply matched its 2021 red zone stats, just matched what they did in 2021. So I'm not asking them to be Bama or Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or Wisconsin. Just be what you were in 2021. They have the number 9 scoring defense in college football last year. If nothing else changes, just that, no more sacks, no more tackles for loss, no more turnovers, nothing else changes, you go from 39th to 30th. Or 39th to 9th in scoring defense, right? So that's the thing is, yes, other areas hopefully improve, but if you can just get back to where you were in previous years in red zone defense, all of a sudden, Ryan, you've got a chance to make a big jump in scoring. And for a team that lost a game by 5, a team that lost a game by 2, a team that lost a game by 11 to Ohio State, but if you make one red zone stop in that game, all of a sudden you've got the ball at the end of the game with a chance to go for a win. Same thing against USC. And so those are the things you look at, Ryan, and say, if you just improve that area and nothing else on your football team changes, just that one stat in 2022, you go from being a 9-4 football or a 8-4 football team to a 10-2 football team, just like that.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you can, and I'm talking no improvements on offense, no improvements on defense, no improvements on special teams anywhere, just right there, scoring red zone defense. All of a sudden, you're a 10-2 football team. That's how bad it was last year. And if they can get better at it, this defense is going to make a big jump, even if we don't necessarily see other jumps. Now, again, Brent, those other improvements can often be a byproduct or can lead to better red zone defense. But look, there's things the players need to do better in the red zone. You don't rank dead last in touchdown defense because your players stink. There's clear schematic and coaching problems that were going on that need to get addressed. That is the biggest thing that must be addressed this spring, and I'm very curious to see if they're able to, because the Notre Dame offense was actually pretty good in the red zone last year. They didn't get there that much, but when they got there, they were pretty good at it. The defense didn't allow you to get to the red zone very often, but when they did, they couldn't stop you, right? If they can just get better there, then all of a sudden you're talking about a much, much, much better scoring defense, Ryan, a much better scoring defense.
And I feel like one thing, and I wouldn't say this is always true all the time, but I think for the most part, man, when you talk about those really, really good defenses, and this isn't even just specific to Notre Dame, it's usually teams that in the big moments rise to the occasion, right? And I feel like that's kind of where we are in the red zone, especially, like the bend but don't break, and don't break. Like that 2012 defense, right, for Notre Dame. Like that, I just felt like every time you got on a goal line situation defensively in 2012, Notre Dame rose to the occasion. Like you think about the Stanford game that year, right, where you stop Stephon Taylor short on 4th down. Like, just feels like those really good defense always kind of step up in those big moments, if that makes sense.
Do you know what Notre Dame ranked in red zone touchdown defense in 2012, Ryan?
Probably pretty good, I would assume.
3rd.
Yeah.
It backs up what you just said.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing is imagine if Notre Dame's defense this past year ranked where that defense ranked. I mean, they gave up. So it's actually a very interesting statistical comparison, Ryan.
Yeah.
Because Notre Dame's defense in 2022 had 34. They gave up 34 red zone opportunities. The 2012 defense gave up 38 red zone opportunities. So it's pretty close. Neither team allowed their opponents to get into the red zone very often.
Yeah.
And Alabama obviously had 5. Big part of the reason that you beat Michigan got into the red zone 5 times, Ryan. 5 times, and they scored 0 touchdowns. 0.
That's how you win, man.
Oklahoma got into the red zone 4 times. They only scored 1 touchdown. Right? You nailed. That's exactly how you win. And so they in 38 red zone opportunities, they gave up only 13 touchdowns that season. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
If this past year Notre Dame had 34 red zone opportunities and they gave up 27 touchdowns. Like you cut that down to where kind of they were in 2022 or 2021. If you cut that down to where they were in 2021. Now 2021 they gave up a lot more red zone opportunities. Notre Dame ranked 74th in the country in red zone trips allowed, but they ranked 4th in the nation in red zone touchdowns. In 47 red zone trips, the 2021 defense gave up only 18 touchdowns, ranked 4th nationally.
Which is 9 less than
yes,
yeah,
on 13 fewer or 13 more red zone trips than what they had in 2022. So, I mean, it's plain and it's plain and simple. It's clear as day, whatever expression you want to use, Ryan. If the red zone defense can get back on track, and again, we're just asking it to be what it has been at other times in Notre Dame's tenure. That's all we're asking.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden, and they've had 2 or 3 other top 30 finishes in red zone touchdown defense. Even if you don't necessarily get all the way up to like top 5, and this is one of the stats that I had in my article, Ryan, is if you just simply get up to rank 20th, right, which isn't even insane. If you just jump up and you rank 20th, all of a sudden Notre Dame goes from 39th, and this is, again, this works with just overall red zone defense where, you give up some field goals and certain things. But like normal is like, half of your trips end in field goals. You don't give up field goals on all of them. You don't stop them on all 6 of them. That's neither of them. You're all of a sudden jumping up to 16th in the nation in scoring defense. If Notre Dame ranks 16th in the nation in scoring defense this year, it's going to be a team that's battling for a playoff spot in November. I mean, they could have done that last year, Ryan, with a terrible offense for most of the year. So what do we see from them to get that fixed? That's going to be a big question mark, because that's one area, Ryan, where if you get better there, all of a sudden we're having a whole different conversation about what Al Golden's defense looked like in 2022.
And the tough part about that conversation is that there could be so many different contributing factors for why you can get better there, right? Or why you weren't good there, I should say. Just kind of flashing back, it's like, maybe you aren't as big up the middle, which we know Notre Dame isn't, right? So maybe you're able to get run on a little bit more. Maybe your linebackers have some bad reads on the second level and you're kind of opening up gaps in the run game. Maybe there's miscommunication on the back ends. Maybe you're not being advantageous with your play calls as far as like calling the right thing in the right opportunity in the right spot. Like there's so many different factors I think that kind of go into why a red zone defense isn't great. And I think that we saw some of those things for sure, but like, you have to find answers to that, right? Like whether that is playing some of the younger, bigger defensive linemen, whether that is putting a different linebacker on the field that maybe is a little bit more assignment sound, whether that is being a little bit more conscious, of understanding the communication level in the red zone is so important, right? Because you're going to play a lot of man coverage in the red zone. Like that's just kind of a foregone conclusion, right? So your communication needs to be really good in those instances, because there's going to be some chances where you're probably going to have to switch. Like there's going to be some times that happens. So I think all those factors can kind of play into why a red zone defense isn't great. And I think it's up for Al Golden and this staff to understand this is our biggest issues, and we need to kind of find resolutions to that very quickly.
So that'll be a big storyline all spring and all summer and all fall until we see it. And, you look at it and you say, Ohio State, 2 red zone trips, both touchdowns. Look, again, I'll say it again. You lost 21 to 10. If just one of those trips turns into a field goal, not even stopping them altogether, just turns into a field goal, it's 17-10 and you get the ball at the end of the game. Your offensive play calling changes dramatically. Some other games, you look at Cal, 2 out of 3. Cal had a shot to tie that game at the end. You make one more red zone stop, and that's not the case. North Carolina, again, 3 for 3 on 3 red zone trips, 3 touchdowns. UNLV, 3 for 3. Syracuse, 3 for 3. Clemson, 2 of 3. Navy, 2 of 3. USC, 5 of 6. So again, just one of those touchdowns turns into a field goal. You've got a chance to, at the end of the game, to go down and score. Now, you need a 2-point conversion. But even if you had a bad red zone performance, but it just wasn't as bad, 4 of 6 instead of 5 of 6, all of a sudden you got a shot to tie that game up at the end. And so that's the reality, Ryan, is, man, you've got chances to be a much better team if you just get better in that one area. And I think that's where I think the NFL model that Al Golden has implemented hurts him the most, is there. Because there's in the red zone, Ryan, you got to have something you believe in the red zone. Hey, look, we get in the red zone, our corners are going to do this. We're just sorry, you're just not doing that. We're going to be good here. And we didn't see that last year. We didn't see that last year. There's no like, okay, we know this is what they like to do in the red zone. I mean, we saw, how many times do we see them get into bad man-to-man matchups? Like you brought up one recently, like you're in the red zone and you're asking Jack Kaiser to go man-to-man against Josh Downs. That's going to be a touchdown for the other team. I'm sorry. That was a much easier touchdown when the one earlier in the game where they scored a touchdown on 4th down, but it required a great route by Josh Downs and a great ball from Drake May to beat Tariq Bracy. It's going to happen sometimes, right? But they're just not good enough. I mean, then they still end up folding. We had several 4th down touchdowns last year, so you got close to stopping them, but then you just couldn't get it done. And it's got to get addressed throughout. And if that gets addressed, Ryan, all of a sudden I'm starting to feel really excited about what this football team is going to be.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it. So, Ryan, that's going to do it for the football part. We're going to jump to the recruiting aspect next. But before we go, folks, if you don't mind, can you go ahead and hit the like button for us, right? If you're listening for the first time, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you make sure that you are always getting alerted to when we're having shows. Ryan, let's move on to recruiting. So it's kind of like it's gone from – this is what I love about recruiting, and I say that somewhat sarcastically. I love it, but I hate it all at the same time. You go from 0 to 100 in like a second in recruiting, right? Like there's these dead periods. So like there's nothing going on in recruiting. Then bam, there's like 50 kids on campus this weekend at different times. Yep. And so we're going to talk about some of those players here today, Ryan. But the reality is I don't expect like necessarily any commitments this weekend. It's not like that kind of thing, but there are some huge opportunities to close the deal on some players, regain some momentum on others, and then with some of these 25 kids to give a really strong first impression, second impression in some kids' cases to really make it to where you're going to be a hard team to beat. So this is a very important recruiting period, and this is going to be a very important recruiting weekend because there's some big-time football players on campus this weekend.
I mean, if you're not signed up at boards.irishbreakdown.com, I would go check it out and just check the visitor list. I'll be having a lot of visit previews over the next couple days. And I mean, like you said, Brian, it honestly starts tomorrow, right? Like the first day of practice for Notre Dame, they get a visitor from Bodie Cahoon, who's a linebacker, obviously out of, Patrick Henry High School in the state of Virginia. Right. But then like when you get to the 24th, 25th, there is a just bevy of talented kids, both in the 2024 and 2025 class, and even some commits and signees in the 2023 class as well that will be on campus. So you have like a bunch of different vantage points. You have multiple classes that are going to be on campus. You have some commits that will be on campus. You have some guys that you feel good about on campus. You have some guys that you really want to move the needle with coming on campus. So, I mean, you're absolutely right, is that people hyper-focus on the team aspect of getting spring ball started, and I get it, right? Like that's my biggest, thing that I want to see as well, is just what this team looks like. But also on the recruiting side of things, this is a big opportunity and a big period coming up for Notre Dame. These kids getting to see a practice, getting to potentially see maybe a little bit of the pro day as well for some of the kids that are going to be there on the 24th. Like that's a really big and impactful opportunity to see scouts walking around, to see some of the players, Michael Mayer, that's probably going to get drafted in the first round, to see the team on field and see the coaches in action. This is a very impactful week for Notre Dame football, starting this recruiting process, because you're going to see every week, every weekend now for the foreseeable future going into the summer, that there's going to be some impactful players that are going to be on campus. And Notre Dame, I know, is ready, and Chad Bowden and that staff are ready to really impress, obviously, a lot of the recruits that are coming over the next few days.
Yeah, let's start with the 22nd, Ryan. We'll just kind of go through the different days. Obviously, right now on the 22nd, there's really only one. There's going to be 6 or 7 kids on campus, but we're going to kind of focus in this conversation on the guys that are really key targets for Notre Dame. Yep. And one of the only guy that I believe has an offer that'll be on campus tomorrow is Bodie Cahoon, who's from, as you mentioned, he's from the Roanoke, Virginia area. lacrosse commit to Ohio State. Archer, he's committed to Ohio State right now, just for lacrosse. Ryan, just you've had a chance to talk to Bodie about the visit.
Yep.
Just kind of give the latest on where things stand with him.
I mean, he's got a really interesting backstory. I mean, like you said, obviously committed to Ohio State, but since kind of opening up and, allowing football to potentially be a pathway for him in college, I mean, you're seeing teams like, the Virginia schools and the University of Tennessee and some other schools that have started to offer recently. And his offer list is starting to really fill out now. And Notre Dame is kind of, very interested in him, obviously. But I think that this visit is really impactful for Bodie because him and his family, they actually grew up in Indiana for a little bit. I think they were in Lewisburg, if I remember correctly, kind of wrote in an article before. And so they grew up in Indiana. They're very aware of the Notre Dame program, but Bodie has actually never visited the campus before. He's never been on campus. And the big thing about this visit is this visit isn't just about football, right? Like he's going to visit, obviously, with the coaches, with the staff, see the practice, all that great stuff. But Bodie and his family also have the opportunity to talk to the lacrosse program and the lacrosse staff for the Irish as well. So the plan for him right now is I wouldn't say he's necessarily like, it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to play both at the next level. Like he's kind of told me in the past that, if the opportunity presents itself and it makes sense, that it's something that he would definitely explore, but I don't think it's necessarily like a foregone conclusion that he's going to play both on the college level. But I think that this is a really big deal for him because I think that it really means a lot to him and his family that Notre Dame is so open to it and that they're allowing him to talk to the lacrosse coaches and to really gauge how it would work, what it would look like, scheduling. I know Drake Bowen, when he was obviously going through his recruitment process, he talked about that a lot from like the baseball perspective too. The fact that Notre Dame was so open and honest and scheduling and trying to understand what a day-to-day would look like, that meant a lot to him. And I think that Bodie kind of has that similar profile right now as far as he wants to know what it's going to look like, if the fit makes sense, how he meshes with the players on campus, obviously, how he meshes with the coaches. This is a big chance for, kind of being a momentum moving type of thing. Because I think that Bodie is high on Notre Dame kind of going into this visit. I think his family is high on Notre Dame. But this one is more like, for me, Brian, like the logistics side of this is like a big thing, right? Like it's not only just impactful for, Notre Dame moving the needle with him from a relationship perspective, but to get a general understanding of what it would be like to potentially play football and lacrosse at the University of Notre Dame. So I think that that's going to give a lot of understanding and really develop, obviously, what the plan is for him moving forward.
Brian, there's a very interesting guy coming on campus. Let's move to the 24th. That's Friday. That's the second spring practice of the year. It's also, I believe, is Pro Day's on Friday or Saturday? Pro Day's on Friday, right?
It's on Friday, the 24th. Yep.
So they have a practice on Friday and the Pro Day on Friday. So you have kids on campus for that. And there's one visitor coming from Katy, Texas. We're going to start with the 24 kids first. There's 2 24 kids and 2 25 kids that we're going to talk about on the 24th.
Yep.
The 2024 defensive end from Katy, Texas, Logan Thomas, is going to be on campus on Friday. Now, he's actually going to be on campus the entire weekend, it looks like. So he's going to be there for several days, and that's Logan Thomas. And he's a very intriguing player, Ryan, because you and I were breaking down his film a little bit before the show, and he's a very interesting player. He's very long, he's skinny. He shows some plays where you're like, okay, I really like that. And then there's a lot of plays where you're like, I need to see more from him. He's a guy that is very intriguing. The staff seems to like him quite a bit. He shows some athleticism. He shows some length. And I think he's one of the few pure Vipers on the board.
Right.
And what I mean by that is a guy that really fits the prototype of what I think they want in a Viper, which is basically kind of a big, rangy linebacker is really what I think. I think if Notre Dame had its way, I think they would probably want to go with a Josh Burnham type over an Isaiah Foskey type in a perfect world. And then the Isaiah Foskey types would be more of the big ends. The 6'5", the 265 guy would be more of the big end where, the 6'4", 245 twitchy guy would be more of the Viper that can move around and do a lot more. So he's going to be on campus this weekend. Very interesting prospect, Ryan. Sometimes I watch his film and I like it. Sometimes I watch his film I'm like, I'm not sure. But one thing I like about it, one thing I like about it, Ryan, that Texas pipeline. And that's, the other thing that intrigues me, Ryan, is he's not like most Texas kids. Most Texas kids are pretty advanced. Yeah. He is not at all. he is a high ceiling guy that you're taking a bit of a flyer on a kid like him, Ryan. But that flyer is worth it because there are definitely some athletic tools and some length to work with him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the cool thing about him is that he can play on the edge and he can play on the second level a little bit. I think you see that on film, that he is going to be a Viper by trade, but like if they're running some 3-3 stuff where they're going to stack him behind the line of scrimmage, he can do that type of stuff as well. So Logan Thomas, for me, I think you hit on it perfectly, Brian. He's got traits that you get excited about. He has the length. He does move really well in space. He has some twitchiness to him. But it's just about like developments, right? Like he's probably a 210-pound kid right now, and he obviously needs to take a massive forward just from a physical development perspective. But the Texas pipeline is important. He comes from Katy, Texas, which is very proud, obviously, of football tradition, obviously out there. So you have a commitment after getting 4 signees from the Texas area, from state of Texas in 2023. You already have a commitment from Leonard Moore, and the prospects of adding someone like a Logan Thomas in this class is very intriguing. It's very interesting because you got the Texas thing, you got the talent, obviously, side of the conversation as well. He's a gifted football player, man. It's just about if you're going to back up the 4-man class of 2023 with guys like Logan Thomas, again, you're doubling down on you need to develop properly, right? Like this isn't a foregone conclusion, high floor type of player. This is a kid that could be a very successful football player on the college level, but it's going to take time physically developing, technically side of things, but the tools are obviously there. So getting him on campus is obviously a big opportunity for Notre Dame. We know that Notre Dame is very high on a guy like a Logan Thomas, and I think getting him on campus is a very positive step for the momentum.
Notre Dame is also going to have Anthony Knapp on this weekend, Ryan, on campus this weekend. He's from Roswell High School in Roswell, Georgia. He's a 2024 offensive lineman that right now does not have a Notre Dame offer, but he did, Ryan, have a Virginia Tech offer, which means he was offered by Joe Rudolph. He'll be on campus this weekend. He's an intriguing kid, Ryan. He's a left tackle in high school. That is not a tackle in college. He is an interior guy, but he's undersized. He's like 260, 265 pounds, but he very much fits the mold of the Joe Otting type, right? Yes. Where he projects inside. But he also fits the mold of what we saw Harry Hiestand recruit last year. So this is the first, I'd say, Joe Rudolph recruit that's on the board. Again, hasn't been offered. I'm not saying they're going to take him. It's just, but clearly there's some interest there because he recruited him at Virginia Tech, where you can say, okay, how does that guy compare to what we've seen from Harry Hiestand's recruiting? And this is a mean, physical kid that puts people on their backsides. Yes. That right there reminds me a lot of the kids that they just signed, in my view, Ryan.
And he lets you know about it more than the kids. Like I felt like the 2023 class, like they were like silent assassins with it, right? Like they put you on the back, they would just get up and walk back to the huddle. Knapp will put you on his back, and then he'll let you know about it, man. Like he'll stand over you a little bit, he'll jaw with you a little bit. I mean, there's one play on his film where he drives someone. I'm sure we'll see it here. He drives them completely into the sideline, and he gets up hooting and hollering, and he's on the other team's sideline when this happens. So you look at him, man. There's extreme physicality there. There's solid explosiveness out of the stance too. I think he really does gain a lot of momentum and a lot of power in very tight windows and very short spaces. So this kid has a molding presence. And the crazy part about it is the power profile is so impressive, but he is only 265 pounds. Imagine when this kid is more in the 290 plus range, maybe bordering 300 pounds. That power profile should only get more and more impressive. And I don't think that he's like a heavy-footed mauler either, right? Like he can move a little bit. He's not like the fleetest of foot, but he can move a little bit. So I think that he has a interesting profile. And I'm interested to see after this weekend, just kind of looking at everything, if Notre Dame does make a push for a guy like this, because obviously there is that relationship with Joe Rudolph.
It reminds me a lot body-wise of Jarrett Patterson coming out of high school.
It's interesting.
And I don't know if he has the length. He doesn't have the length to me to play tackle, and he doesn't have the booty to play tackle, to be honest with you. He needs to be an inside guy. And I'll tell you what, Ryan, as a guard, he brings some value. Where I really like his potential value is as a center. That's real. I mean, you're talking about a guy that moves his feet well for a center, would move his feet well for a center. He would, to me, his athletic profile grades up as an inside guy. Yep. He brings the physicality and toughness that you look for an interior guy. And I think he's a guy that, would fit that position well. That would be the profile that I would look for him at, Ryan. But I love the demeanor this kid brings to the table. I really do. He's not an elite player. He's, none of that. He's just a good, tough, physical, mauling presence.
Yes.
And right now, they need to expand the board a little bit because we don't know where they stand with certain guys. They do need to close on certain guys, and I have no problem with them expanding the board and just making sure that look, we got to see them get Liam Andrews on campus and Gilby Lambert on campus and Caleb Brewer on campus and be able to close the deal. And in the meantime, you got to start expanding your board. And Anthony Knapp is one of those guys that makes a lot of sense to be part of that board expansion because, like you said, he certainly fits the Notre Dame demeanor. That's for darn sure of what they're looking for. There's no doubt about that.
No, man, he really does. I think that he would mix in, especially with the 2023 group, really well. If he did end up, let's say, with Notre Dame, like he would fit day one with guys like Sam Pendleton and the Joe Ottings of the world as far as the demeanor attributes. So I think he's an interesting player to keep an eye on. Again, like he doesn't have an offer from Notre Dame right now. We don't know if one's going to get extended anytime soon. We don't know if he's a guy that Notre Dame's going to push for. But he is an interesting football player, a Georgia kid as well, which we'd love to start to tap in a little bit to a Georgia pipeline, right, Brian? Like that would be nice because they put out players in a year-to-year basis. So, and Knapp's an interesting player to keep an eye on.
Couple 25 guys that will be on campus this weekend, Ryan. We won't dive too much into them because they're both guys that were pot of gold offer guys, but also guys that are still new to the board. But I did want to mention Landon McComber is one of the kids going to be on campus this weekend. He is a linebacker from Desert Pines in Las Vegas. There's several Las Vegas kids that got offers from Notre Dame on the pot of gold day. He's actually going to be on campus, Ryan, for a couple days. It would seem
24, 25
this week.
Yep.
So he's an intriguing kid because he is long and very skinny, but projected as linebacker, more of a rover type right now. But he's an intriguing kid, Ryan. I don't know. I know you've had a chance to watch his film. He can run. Yes. That kid can run.
He's a deer, man.
He's just 185, 190 pounds right now. That's the only problem. Who reminds me a lot of in the 24 class, who I love, reminds me a lot of Tylen Singleton. Not quite as good as Tylen yet, but he's a year behind. I never saw Tylen sophomore film. I'm just saying where he is now to where Tylen is as a junior. He's not there yet, but very similar body type, maybe a little longer, very similar downhill speed. It's a very intriguing kid that they're going to have on campus, Ryan.
Yeah, and it's a guy that all indications, obviously Notre Dame just offered him, right? So obviously there's interest there, right? But I think that he's a kid that Notre Dame, definitely likes, obviously, and they've kind of, he is a physical and explosive striker. That's how I would kind of phrase him, right? Like you said, Brian, he's a kid that needs to fill out, but you'll see that pursuit speed
there.
is different. That is different stuff, man. And he's not just a pure space player though. Like you're going to see him stacked a lot and he'll come downhill and he'll meet with force and come to balance and do all the traditional things you would love out of a linebacker position. So he is a really interesting player. Like you said, definitely more of a rover profile now, but again, he's a sophomore in high school. So who knows how he'll fill out? Maybe he's 215 pounds when he leaves. Like you have no idea. So really talented second level defender though, brings a lot of physicality, has been very open about his whole process with me or just in our few conversations so far. I think he's very interested in Notre Dame. I'll say that he was talking about, just I remember my first interview with him. He talked a lot about growing up and just being so enamored with the tradition that Notre Dame brings and just understanding how well they develop football players, how well they develop people. So I think he gets it, man. I think he has a good understanding of that.
It's a 185-pound kid right here. Yes. I'm sorry. Like, that's a 185-pound kid that just did that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, here he is against Bishop Gorman. But here's the thing I like about him, Ryan. We talk projects, and there's some comments on the board about projects. My favorite type of projects that you take in Notre Dame, my favorite type of projects are the guys whose primary need for development is happening with Matt Balis.
Yes.
Right, where the kid's got this kid's got technical skill, right? His block destruction is good for his age. He takes on blocks well, he plays with good angles. He's a good tackler. This kid fundamentally plays good football.
Yep.
Where this kid needs to get work and development is with Matt Balis. And when that's the guy that's responsible for your development, I feel very good about your ability to get to that point, in my opinion. But this kid, his short area speed, his long speed, his change of direction is all really good. So I did want to point this young man out, and that he's a good football player, Ryan.
He's twitchy,
really
man.
Football player.
I have visions already of Landon McComber coming off the edge as a rover, coming off the slot and just he could do that type of stuff, man. He's a really explosive kid.
Yep. He's from Nevada. He's a 3-star recruit, according to the only service that's taken the time to grade him so far.
Yeah.
But Ryan, he's got offers from Notre Dame, Georgia, USC, Tennessee, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas A&M. This ain't a 3-star, folks. This kid can play.
It's not a 3-star.
This kid can flat out play.
And like you said, Brian, just based on his offer list, the recruiting rankings will follow because that's what people base it on.
Yep,
so
that's right. Ryan Gee, a tight end from Georgia, from Milton High School in Georgia, will also be on campus this weekend, Ryan. That'll be our first chance to get a glimpse of him. He is also someone who was one of the pot of gold offers as well. And that was Landon McComber, by the way. Yes. So let's move on to March 25th, Ryan, because this is the big day. March 25th is the huge day. There's going to be double-digit prospects on campus, Ryan, and some big-time players on campus. If Notre Dame has a big success rate from Saturday's visit date, their 24 and 25 classes will be outstanding, especially 24. There are 3, in my opinion, I'm speaking for me now, there's 3 must-get players on campus from the 24 class on campus on Saturday, Ryan. And we'll start with the 24 kids. And the 3 that I'm talking about are Justin Scott, Jaden Riddell, and John Mitchell. For me, all must-gets. Yeah. Let's start with Justin Scott. This is a big one for Notre Dame. Look, he's not going to commit this weekend. Don't see that happening. He's already got officials scheduled for June. He's got visits scheduled for April. He plans to let this process play out. But there's a huge opportunity for Notre Dame this weekend to once again put themselves in position to say, we are still the team to beat. All the momentum you've got, we've stunted. That's a huge, huge part for Notre Dame is they've got to get the momentum back and put themselves back in the driver's seat. And if you're in the driver's seat, then let them go to Georgia. Let them go to those other places, right? Because that's what he's going to do anyway. You've got to put yourself in the driver's seat here. And that's where Notre Dame is at this weekend.
And Notre Dame's the no for Justin Scott, right? Like Georgia, I know, and Georgia should be appealing for a defensive tackle right now. Like what defensive tackle would be absolutely nuts to not at least consider Georgia for a couple minutes. Like it would just be unrealistic. But at the end of the day, this is a Chicago kid. He knows the Notre Dame program. He wanted a Notre Dame offer for the longest time. He has it, and now he's become a priority, obviously, for Notre Dame. And we could talk about the semantics and the process of how we got here. But at the end of the day, just a few weeks ago, Justin Scott was close to committing to the University of Notre Dame. That is a fact. That is not that is what it is. Unfortunately for Notre Dame, it was kind of put on hold for a little bit, and for Justin, he wanted to work the process work out a little bit. Make sure he wasn't making a rush decision. I respect his process in this whole thing.
And that's why I don't actually say, unfortunately, for Notre Dame, honestly, Ryan. And I get where you're coming from because it'd have been great to have him in the class. But I feel like the one lesson that we learned from last year is don't take early commitments from kids who aren't quite ready to be done. Right? And that's the reality of it. I mean, Peyton Bowen, from the minute he committed, always talked about how he was going to take more visits. There's no need to take his commitment. Right? I think Keon's situation was a little bit different. I don't think Keon intended to take visits. I think that kind of came later when he kind of blew up as a prospect. But don't take commitments from kids who still want to take visits. And if he wants to commit, hey man, we love you. We want you. You don't need to rush this. Look, you don't need to worry about holding on to a spot. You're in this class whenever you want to come, because I think perception wise that matters. But I get where you're also coming from, Ryan, because it's unfortunate because it'd be great to have him in the class. I get where you're coming from.
Well, I guess I should rephrase. It's unfortunate if he doesn't end up in the class and he was ready to commit to Notre Dame. Like that, I guess that'll kind of
a big time player from a very good school in Chicago at a position of huge need. He has a profile that they absolutely need. This is a big weekend for Notre Dame to just take another step towards solidifying yourself as the leader. And what we're going to do with Justin Scott's recruitment moving forward is, look, we've got you up to date on how we got here.
Yeah.
What we're going to do now is, and this is what's important for Notre Dame, what happened in the past is why he's not in the class right now. It is what it is. But what can you do now moving forward to close the deal? That's the key. So what can Al Washington do moving forward to close the deal? This weekend's going to be important. Letting Justin Scott get a chance to see him coaching and interacting with his players is going to be important. Yep. Right. And then him getting a chance with some face-to-face time with Justin, hopefully with Justin's mom, if she's able to come up as well. I think that's going to be important for the two of them. I really do. Because if Justin Scott ends up in the class, I don't really care to talk about the mistakes that were made to get him here. I just care that he gets into class at the end of the day.
Sure.
Recover and get him in the class. That's the key. That's what our focus will be on. Because they've still got a very good shot to make that happen.
Sure. And with this being an unofficial visit, obviously, too, with him having a couple of officials already scheduled, in the next couple of months, it would also be big if if Notre Dame was able to regain that momentum and, you get him back on campus one more time before he makes a decision, right? And make sure that you get an official, obviously, and coming back to Notre Dame. So I think this is a potential needle mover, or I don't even know if I say needle mover. Like it's regaining the momentum after he's been busy with basketball and he hasn't been doing the whole recruiting thing for a little bit, right? Like he's kind of been just kind of staying in Chicago. Now that visits are popping up, now that he's starting to make the rounds, make the travels, all that great stuff, I think Notre Dame has the opportunity to, again, show Justin why Notre Dame has been on the front of his mind for so long and continue to build that momentum back up.
Absolutely. And again, he's not alone for kids on campus this weekend, Ryan, that are big-time prospects for Notre Dame. Another young man on campus this weekend is Jaden Riddell from Missouri. He's another very, very talented must-get player, in my opinion, that's going to be on campus this weekend. He is from Peculiar, Missouri. I think it's how you say that, Peculiar, Missouri, Raymore High School. This is a guy that is been catching a lot of balls recently from CJ Carr, Ryan.
Yes.
Very highly ranked player. I believe one service, I'm pulling it up now, I believe one service has him ranked as in the top in the 30s nationally. Yep. Yeah, On3 has him ranked as the number 31 overall player in the country. ESPN has him at number 96, ranked as the number 1 and number 3 tight end in the country by those two groups. He's without question a top 5 tight end in this class, Ryan. Georgia recently offered him. I think he's going to be visiting there soon. Ohio State's on him. Alabama's on him. I am curious what your thoughts on him. From sources I've heard, Ryan, Notre Dame's in a really good place with him. A really good place with him. Getting him on campus this weekend is huge because this is your chance to really show him what you're all about. He knows who's going to be throwing him footballs in college. That's a big selling point for you right now if he comes to Notre Dame. Now you've got to show him what your vision is for how you're going to use him in your offense, because I don't care who's recruiting him, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. When you're talking about a tight end, you're in that ball game. Mm-hmm. I don't care who else. I mean, D tackles is a little different story. You don't have Georgia's history at that position. At tight end, nobody can compete with what you've produced. This is a kid that you got to get. And I believe he is sort of that number 1 guy for Notre Dame right now. I think him and Carter Nelson are 1 and 2 right now. And I think he is sort of at the top of that list of who Notre Dame would really like to have in this class alongside Jack Larson, Ryan. It's a big-time football player, in my opinion.
And I obviously we always talk about not getting, too involved in like the Twitter likes and the Twitter posts and all that stuff. But I'll say this, Brian, the team that he is kind of frequented most recently with kind of the back and forth with CJ Carr is Notre Dame, obviously, right? And kind of talking about their relationship together. Because for people that don't know, CJ Carr, 2024 quarterback that is committed to Notre Dame, they play on the same 7-on-7 team, right? So at least they have over the last couple of weeks. And you see them kind of playfully back and forth, kind of talk about one another. And I think that for me, because we were the first site that had the news that he was going to be visiting, kind of coming up this weekend. And this is one where I think Notre Dame has a chance to really push the envelope for him and to, maybe to gain, I think they have a lot of traction, obviously, but to really maybe push themselves to the forefront of this conversation. Because like you said, there's a lot of top schools that are going to be coming after him. There's a lot of offers, he's been extended from some very prestigious programs. There's no doubt, but Notre Dame has the backing of developing the tight end position. I mean, he will literally be on campus a day after Michael Mayer is just working out for NFL scouts, right? Like that's not a bad thing to be a part of. So I think that shows an opportunity for them to really move the needle this weekend and to hopefully continue the Missouri pipeline. We talked about the Missouri pipeline in 2023, continuing to get built. 2024, a guy like a Jaden Riddell with an Aeneas Williams and those types of guys would be obviously an awesome get. So, just kind of brief conversations with the family on Riddell's side. I think that they are definitely pro Notre Dame. I think that they obviously value what Notre Dame brings to the table. And I think that this is a potential momentum builder for Notre Dame this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. CJ at one point in time recently, Ryan tweeted, I mean, again, this is in fun. They're doing this like in fun. It's not like a real thing, but he talked about hey, package deal. That's them just having some fun with recruiting. Sure. It's not like guarantee they're a package deal. It's just them having some fun, but it is important when you're a kid who is a pass catcher. It's important to know that I'm going to have some dudes throwing me the football. And right now, Notre Dame in the last several months has completely changed the future of that position. When you look at first getting CJ Carr in 24 and then kind of getting Kenny Minchie in 23, a little bit backwards. So I think a kid like him is obviously that's a big time pickup. Would be a big time pickup if Notre Dame can close the deal, and that's what this weekend is about, Ryan. It's about I think they're in a really good position coming into this weekend. I think he's developed a really good relationship with Jared Parker. Remember, Notre Dame went out and saw him at least once or twice. I think twice. Period. Yeah, and so they went out and saw him. They've made him a priority. They've built a good relationship. Now it's his chance to get on campus and really take it to that next level. And it's the first face-to-face with I think Jared Parker and Jaden Riddell since Jared Parker's been named the offensive coordinator. That's going to be very fascinating to see how that goes. So he's a big-time football player. Another guy, Ryan, that I absolutely love, and I know that some people don't necessarily see him the same way I do. I think this kid's really good. And that is John Mitchell from Jacksonville High School. He goes to I think he goes to Mandarin, I believe, Ryan. He goes to Mandarin High School in Jacksonville. I'll tell you what, man, I love this. I absolutely love this kid. You've got two long corners in the class already. It's a 2024 corner. You got two long outside corners in the class already. John Mitchell's a completely different type of corner than those two kids. He is more of a 5'11", not as big, like slot field guy. And he's got a lot of talent, Ryan. He's a guy that, I absolutely love this kid. Now, I don't know if he's a burner per se, Ryan, but this kid runs plenty good enough for me. But he is very explosive, very twitchy, very instinctive, and for a 5'11" guy, pretty long, it appears on film. So this is one of my favorite players in the class. And look, I give On3 a lot of crap, rightfully so, because they do a really bad job with rankings for the most part. But I'm going to be real with you. They're the only ones that have him close to being right. 247 and Rivals have him as a 3-star kid. Rivals ranks him as the number 88 player in the Florida and the number 57 corner, and 247 ranks him as an 83 player in Florida and number 50 corner, and On3 has him as the number 61 player in the country. It's just absurd, the difference.
That was like Micah Bell last year. Yes. That was like that type of situation.
But this is one where On3 has it right, or at least closer to being right with John Mitchell than the others do. There's no way there's 50-some corners in the country better than this kid. Not even close. I don't know if there's 10, Ryan, in my opinion. This guy can flat out ball. I love this kid on film. I really do.
And I really like, because this is like that off man click and close type of corner, right? A guy that you just kind of let him read and react and get physical coming downhill. And I think that your note about him potentially fitting inside at nickel a ton is very true, because he's a kid that will come up and he'll stick you in the run game too, man. Like, he's not afraid to stick his nose in there. So you need that type of work playing the alley in a defense, right? Like, you see his ability in the run game, obviously there on film, if you're watching us live on YouTube.
Very underrated part of Tariq Bracey's game last year. Tariq did a really nice job as a fifth-year guy in the run game.
Yeah.
And he'd get overwhelmed at times because he's small. This kid's bigger than Tariq was. But you cannot be a nickel guy in normal down situations, Ryan, if you can't play the run game. And when I say run game, I think you do as well. We're also referring to like the perimeter pass game, the bubbles, the nows, because that's essentially a perimeter run. You got to take on blocks and make a tackle at the line.
Yeah.
But yes, Ryan, he is very, very good run defender for his size.
Because everyone just assumes that you can just throw a smaller corner in there at nickel and they're going to be good. It's just like, no, that's not how that works. That's not how that works at all.
Right.
But Mitchell is that inside out. I mean, I think that's where the game's going, Brian, like both on the NFL and college level, is to have those corners that can kind of move around and match up both outside and in a little bit, like in theory, right? And having a guy like a Mitchell that could guard a specific body type, both on the outside, both on the inside. Like he brings a lot of upside, obviously, a lot of coverage versatility of variable variety, I should say. I don't know what my words are saying right now, but coverage variety to a guy like a John Mitchell. And again, man, he's a Florida kid. Notre Dame's had their struggles in Florida, obviously, over the years. So getting in and moving the needle with him would be massive for him because, Notre Dame has had the tough go in Florida.
Yeah. It's been, say, disappointing couple of years in Florida, to say the least. But, yeah, he's a kid that I would love to see Notre Dame get, Ryan. Very, very talented player. Very talented player. Couple other 23 kids that are going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan. One is Marcellus Barnes. He's another corner from Tennessee. I think that he would be a guy that I could see Notre Dame moving to if they're not able to get any traction this weekend with John Mitchell and they don't feel they have a shot to flip Caleb Beasley. I think right now there's 3 kids that they view as who they really like for that number 3 corner spot. It's obviously Caleb Beasley, who we talked about, is committed to Tennessee. John Mitchell, who I'm Mike Mickens absolutely loves as a player. I'm confident in saying that. And then the third is Jonathan Newcomb it's Jonathan Newcomb, right? Jeremiah Newcomb. As soon as I said it, I was like, that didn't sound right. Jeremiah Newcomb from Arizona, another really good player. He's more of a pure nickel to me, whereas John Mitchell to me is a nickel field guy. He can play both nickel and the field positions, in my opinion. And honestly, in some coverages, John Mitchell's strong enough to play boundary. I just don't know if I'd want him playing boundary every snap. Like if you're a left-right team, I'm fine with John Mitchell being an outside guy, in my view. I just wouldn't necessarily put him there all the time. I mean, he's not that much smaller than Benjamin Morrison. He's really good in coverage.
Yep.
So he doesn't hit like Benjamin did in high school, but he's not that far off either. So he's got some of those skills. Those are the 3 that they really like. Marcellus Barnes is a kid from Tennessee that's coming in campus this weekend. Right? He's from the McCallie School in Chattanooga, another Tennessee kid. Curious how the visit goes there. He's listed anywhere from 5'11" to 6'2". I think that's something I'm very interested in, is to see where is he on that spectrum.
Well, I the first size I saw was 6'2", and I'm like, he's not 6'2".
That's it, right. So I'm curious to see what his measurements actually are and see how they kind of stack up. So it'll be interesting on campus. Another guy that's going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan, there's 2 linemen that I'm curious about. Number 1 is Andrew Sprague, who is a very intriguing player to me, a kid from Rockhurst High School in Kansas City. I know a lot of people like this kid, Ryan. I believe one of the services actually has him as a top 100 player. I'm going to be honest, though, Ryan. I like some things about him, but he's not a top 100 guy anymore. He's a consistent top 250 guy. The highest is 142 by On3. They have him as the number 142 player. So to me, I'm not sure how I feel about him, Ryan. Like, big size, strong kid. Don't love his flexibility for a 6'8" guy. But then you see some clips on film, you're like, okay, that's really impressive. Really impressive. So I'm still in my feeling out phase with Andrew Sprague at this point in time. But this is going to be an important, if you're going to have a shot with him this weekend, needs to be it, because he seems to have a lot of interest in Notre Dame, Ryan.
Yes, he does.
It's just how does Notre Dame feel about him? I think we'll have a much better feel about that after the weekend.
He got a little bit involved. I think he may have even retweeted that conversation between CJ and Jaden Riddell, right, Brian? So I think that him and Jaden know each other, obviously a little bit being Missouri guys. But Andrew is a interesting player, like you said. I mean, he's listed at 6'8", about 270 pounds right now, continuing to fill out that frame. A massive kid, man. Like that is just enormous. And there's some easy natural power there. I think that this weekend is really big for getting Andrew on campus, especially Brian, because he's a guy that we know Notre Dame likes a good bit, right? But the question is for me is I want Matt Bayless to be able to see him, right?
Yes.
To see are you going to be able to fill out that frame and, add flexibility too, right? Because I agree. I don't think the flexibility is great on film, but there are flashes where I'm like, okay, that foot quickness actually looked pretty good on that rep.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just him growing into his body, getting comfortable being in his own skin. That could be a part of the equation, I think, for me. So I'm interested to see Matt Bayless's perspective on Andrew coming in this weekend.
Yeah, and I think you nailed the key right there. That's the thing, is that's clip right there, Ryan. Really not a good bend on that pass pro. Just really kind of slow out of his break. But then there's other clips right here where okay, that was good
pad level. Yeah,
good pad level, kept base and just drove that kid into the ground. So that's what you see is this particular play, he moved a lot better than he did on the previous screen where he looked stiff and tight. So you wonder, is it technique? Is it he's still growing into his body? And someone who's going to be able to tell you that is Matt Balis. And that's why you kind of look at it and say, this is why you get kids on campus before you necessarily make a push. And that's kind of that's what we're going to see from him. But he's a big kid, pretty highly, highly ranked. He's a unanimous top 250, top 230 player actually in the country.
And he's mean, man. So, continuing the trend on getting mean offensive linemen to Notre Dame. Again, we don't know what the fortune or the future will be with Andrew Sprague with Notre Dame, but he's a player that obviously Notre Dame is doing their homework on. That is, since they offered him a couple months ago, they have maintained a relationship with him, obviously, and keep building that. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, just what is kind of the next step after this visit, right? And I think that could be a big opportunity for everyone to be able to get to know and to understand the fit, see his projection. Like, this is a full staff conversation this weekend for me about Andrew Sprague. Like, hey, Coach Balis, what do you think about him, right? Coach Rudolph, how much do you like him? How much did he mesh with the other players on campus? What was what does the fit look like? And I think you can start to get that understanding this weekend.
Ryan, the next kid on campus is coming this weekend is a very interesting player. He's another guy that I'm just not sure how I feel about him, and that is Sean Sevillano is my best shot at pronouncing his name correctly.
Yeah.
6 foot. He's listed at like what, 6'2", I think 290 is what he's listed as.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
Clearwater, Florida, Clearwater Academy. I'm not sure how I feel about this kid, Ryan. I'd be curious to know more about him. I have a feeling like he hasn't played football for super long. I just have this feeling that he hasn't. But I'll tell you what, man, he's got some really impressive moments on film and then some other moments where you're just like, yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how I feel about him. But, look, Notre Dame needs beef, and that's something he definitely brings to the table. He's a beefy kid.
He's very beefy. He's stout, man. He absolutely is. I mean, I think when we were talking about him earlier, Brian, like, this is that kid that's a true nose that won't get moved at the point of attack a ton. Like, he's that anchor down nose type. Similar to, I think that he plays similarly to Aiden Kiana when he was coming out of high school, although he's shorter than Aiden is.
Not as thick as Aiden was either.
Yeah. So, but I think that is a style
Kurt
that
Hinish to his game, I would say, Ryan. That's another one that I think would be a good comp for him. Is there some where the motor maybe is a little bit better than the raw tools? You know what I mean? The fight is a little bit better maybe than some of the raw tools in my opinion.
I just don't think he's overly athletic. I think he's solid for his body type. I don't think that he plays with a tremendous pad level all the time, but he's a very strong kid. He's strong.
That's what makes me wonder, Ryan, if he hasn't played football for a long time. He just does things where he's out there like he's kind of street balling a little bit. I'm very curious, and I know we're trying to get a hold of him, but I'm very curious to find out how long he's been playing football. I really am.
Yeah,
I really am. Because he brings some things you want, Ryan, right? He's got good size. He's beefy. They need some beef. I love his motor, and he's incredibly productive. I mean, you're watching this film, Ryan. He plays really low level of high school football in Florida, but he absolutely obliterates that level of football. He had 22 sacks last year. It's like, I was like, when I first popped this, I was like, there's no way this kid had 22 sacks. Then you're like, he's in the backfield on that one. He's in the backfield on that one. He's in the backfield on that one. You're like, okay, yeah, this kid had a lot of sacks and tackles for loss.
I mean, do you see some of the fields that he's playing on in these clips? Yeah. Like it's very low.
Like I said, very low level of football, but he obliterates it. He just looks like that clip right there looks to me like a kid has no clue what he's doing, but yet he still goes out and makes a play. Like, I just feel like I'm curious to find out how long this kid's been playing football. That's all I'm going to say. I'm very curious to find that out because there's some things you like and some things that concern me, but it's kind of like with Christopher Burgess. Man, I really like some things about him, but then the moment you told me last year was his first year of football, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now some of those questions just got answered. Now I know why he's doing this, he's doing that, and those things start to make those things start to make a little bit more sense to me.
I mean, this kid's he's another kid too that, I mean, I would love perspective from Coach Balis as far as like the body type and everything and just how he feels like he continue to fill out and maybe take some bad weight off and put good weight back on. Like there's a lot of conversation around this kid, but ultimately, man, like priority this cycle was to get bigger on the interior, right? Like that's why you're going after guys like, well, it's not the only reason you're going after Justin Scott. Justin Scott's a playmaking big body on the interior, but you need to add size. There's no
TJ Lindsay and David, You know what I'm talking about.
Poly.
Yes,
Yeah.
him. I mean, you do. I don't think Notre Dame needs like 300 pounders like some people think they do, but they need some. And we talked earlier about red zone defense, right? I mean, if you can't go big when you need to, that's a problem. And Notre Dame's had that issue at times.
Because when you can't put a couple big guys on the interior that can plug up gaps, then you have to put more players inside, and that makes you get at leverage to the outside. Right. That was like the play against UNLV last year. Remember, Brian, where Maris was chasing someone to the perimeter? It was like they got completely out leveraged because they just don't have a ton of size inside. They had to put more guys inside to overcompensate.
Right, yeah. Exactly. You nailed it. It. That's the 2024 kids coming on campus this weekend, Ryan. There's some 2025 dudes on campus this weekend, Ryan.
Yes.
And, we'll start at quarterback. Obviously, we'll kind of work down from a position standpoint. Kid that we talked a lot about yesterday, so we need to talk a lot about him again today. But Cutter Boley from Kentucky is going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan. So since the pot of gold, he is the first 2025 quarterback will be on campus. It will not be the last. We do expect George McIntyre on campus this spring and summer. We do expect Deuce Knight will be on campus on April 1st. So getting Cutter Boley on campus will be a good first step towards kind of developing relationships, further relationships with the sort of the five guys that I view as sort of the top targets at quarterback right now in the 25 class.
I think Cutter gets to see what the offense is potentially going to look like under Jared Parker a little bit. And then he also gets to talk to Gino Guidugli, who obviously is the quarterback coach. So developing those relationships, seeing what an offense looks like at Notre Dame, and then he can visualize his fit, obviously, with the program, right? Like, does that make sense? Does my play style fit? Can I excel at a place like Notre Dame? So, I mean, I think we hit on it yesterday. Tall kid, strong arm. Not the most overly athletic kid, but, good enough in the pocket, obviously, from a movement perspective. And we'll see, obviously, how that quarterback board fills out for Notre Dame.
And I would assume that Gino Guidugli likes Kentucky quarterbacks. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that since he was a Kentucky quarterback, that you would like that. But wouldn't be my top choice, Ryan, as quarterback. But he's a good football player. He is. He's got a very, very live arm. Next guy that's going to be on campus, Ryan. Again, we're going position by position. There's a very intriguing receiver on campus this weekend, and that is Jamie French. He is the younger brother by the similar name. I think it was Maurice was his older brother who played at Pitt. He's a very intriguing player. I don't think Notre Dame has much of a shot with him just because of the nature of where he's from and the fact that he's a highly ranked kid. But it says a lot to me. He's also from Mandarin High School in Florida, teammate of John Mitchell. But it says a lot to me that he's coming on campus. I mean, you're at least in the game at that point in time, Ryan. You're at least in the game.
And he's been very responsive in the past, obviously, when I've reached out and stuff. So that's always a good sign, right? Is the guys that are at least open to it, are very responsive in that regard. So like you said, and it also, I think, does help you a little bit that his brother did play in the Midwest, right? Like he did play up at Pitt. Yeah. So I'm sure he's spent a decent amount of time in the Midwest, at least going to Pitt football games, right? So I think that's, a opportunity to move the needle a little bit. Will you be able to move the needle enough to be in there till the end as a kid that's ranked as a top 30 recruit by, I think, at least one platform?
He's top 50 by the only two that have ranked him so far.
Exactly. So he's a well thought of young man, very talented. Game is similar-ish to Ryan Wingo. I'm not going to say he's going to be quite as good as what Ryan Wingo is.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. But he has that type of profile. So Notre Dame get him on campus is a great sign, but ultimately he's a 2025 kid, so who knows?
Right. It's very early.
Yes.
It's definitely very early for him. There's another receiver that they're going to have on campus this weekend, Ryan, that's a very intriguing kid for me, and that's Cooper Perry from Arizona. Have you had a chance to speak with him yet? I know we had. Okay, so I know we had a story on him. I just wasn't sure if it was an interview story or not, if it's just him setting a visit. But this is a kid, obviously, Ryan, that was also got a pot of gold offer from Notre Dame. He is a kid from Notre Dame Prep in Scottsdale, Arizona. So obviously, Catholic school. I'm going to go out on a limb there on saying that it's a Catholic school. Very intriguing player, Ryan. Very intriguing player. Not ranked by any of the services so far, but clearly Notre Dame sees something they like, and he's a pretty athletic kid, Ryan. I mean, he's got some good film. He does have some good film.
And there's no doubt who he models his game after. I mean, he's a white 6'2" wide receiver that wears number 10. Cooper
Yeah.
Cup, baby. That's
Yeah.
who he plays like
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You'll see on film, man. He runs some good routes. Technically, he's very good in my opinion especially for his age. He dominates his level of competition. He had like 70 something catches, over 1,000 yards last year. I think he had like 20 touchdowns as a sophomore. So he's a very talented and technically sound football player. And like you said, Notre Dame getting an Arizona kid on campus, I'm all for it, man. Notre Dame is just start dipping into the Arizona pool occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned for a sophomore to be that good with the ball in his hands, and look, he's going against not a great level of competition, but look, Ryan, you're a 4-5 no matter who you're playing against, right? You're a 4-1 shuttle no matter who you're playing against. You see foot quickness, you see him be able to make some plays after the catch. You see a guy that has the potential to get even better and better and better as a route runner. And he's got good hands. You just saw that right there. He's got good long speed. I think his long speed's better than his burst. I think that's the one thing I want to see him improve upon. But again, he's talking about a sophomore. It's a sophomore film, folks. But I really like the size. I really like the production. And I mean, like you said, he's got a really natural feel for the game. He really does. And he can catch the ball. I mean, he's a good football player. He's a very good football player. This is Cooper Perry, by the way. So, yeah, and somebody just said in the chat, I wouldn't mind a Cooper Cup at Notre Dame. Word. Same.
Every NFL team wouldn't mind a Cooper Cup either. So,
exactly. So, yeah, he's an interesting player. I'm very curious to see, for me, how he checks out size-wise. I love that release right there. That's just stupid.
He's got several of those on this film. It's like, oh.
I know. But I'm very curious to see what his size, like, is he a legit 6'2", like he's listed at, or is he a little smaller than that? I'm very curious to see that. But this is a kid that's got some tools. It's not a super deep receiver board for Notre Dame in 2025 just yet, Ryan, but some of the kids that are on it are pretty good. Jamie French is really good. Obviously, I was going to say Cooper Cup. Carter Perry is really good. And, of course, flat out who my top receiver is so far in the 2025 class. It is Talon Taylor, who Ryan will guess who else is going to be on campus this weekend.
Yep.
Taylor is going to be on campus this weekend.
Yeah, and I've had a couple opportunities to talk to Talon since he's gotten offered, even a little bit before that. I mean, he is one of those kids that looks like, as a sophomore out of the state of Illinois, by the way, that he looks like one of those guys that would end up at Ohio State, Brian. Like, he looks like those types of dudes, right? And he's got straight line speed. He's very nuanced for his age, understands how to get in and out of breaks, has kind of that explosiveness in and out of breaks as well. It's a good football player, man. And it seems that, Notre Dame has made a good first impression obviously on him, recruiting him over the last couple of weeks. So I think Notre Dame is going to be a player here as long as everything goes well. And so we'll see obviously how things turn out there, but a very underrated player from a rankings perspective, but he's sure to blow up.
Now,
too long.
I might've got that wrong. Did he say he was coming in this weekend or is it a following weekend? I know he told you he was coming, but I might've got the weekend wrong actually.
1 second.
So I know he had told you when he was coming, but I might've got that wrong as far as the date.
I'm pulling up the visitor list real quick and I'll be able to update that. Talon Taylor is coming on. He's coming on the 25th, so he'll be here this weekend.
Okay, so he is marked as the 25th. Okay.
Yes.
So as long as he still follows through with that, obviously that's another big one. That's my top receiver in the class right now, Ryan. There's no doubt about it. I want to get back to him at the end because I'm going to kind of talk about him and another guy at the end. A couple other guys that are coming in campus this weekend that we talked about yesterday. Chris Burgess is going to be on campus this weekend, and I think that's an important one for Notre Dame as well because he's another guy, Ryan, that I want to see. I want to measure him. I want to size him up if I'm the Notre Dame staff. I want to see, like, okay, what does this kid look like when he's out there on the practice field standing next to our guys? Because from what we can see on film, Ryan, that is an impressive looking kid. That's an impressive looking kid on film. There's no doubt about it.
And he's listed at like 6'4", 235, 240, depending who you look at. I mean, he's got a frame, though, that I look at him and I'm like, that kid could be 265, 270, maybe more. Like, he's got a really impressive frame, well-built AAU basketball player that is still very new to the football game. But this is one of those first men off the bus type of guys, man. Like, he looks the part. He's figuring it out, obviously, still. Big end for sure. Maybe could be an interior player as a playmaker 3-tech when it's all said and done, depending on what the maturation is. But this kid, as you can see, just if you're watching live with us on YouTube, this kid is a very impressive player from a physical perspective. So as he continues to mature, gets better from the technical side, this kid could be an extreme riser, in my opinion. I'm excited to see what he does as a junior for Simeon because I think that he has all the tools to be very successful.
You see the size in those photos, right? That's a sophomore. It's a sophomore in high school.
And he's got quick feet too, man, because he's a basketball player, right? Like he's got those quick feet as well. The tools are there for sure. It's just about getting comfortable, obviously, now.
Yeah, he doesn't look like a sophomore, Ryan. And again, very raw kid, but you can't teach size and strength. I mean, that's a big kid he's going against right there. And he just locks him out and just knocks him off the ball. He's a raw but very toolsy kid, and I'm very curious to see just how big he is. We'll find that out this weekend. Also, Dominic Kulak, who we talked about yesterday, will also be on campus this weekend.
Yep.
Kevin Humes, who's a cornerback from the Baltimore area. We've said that Notre Dame has offered a lot of kids from Maryland. A lot of Maryland kids already. Kevin Humes from St. Francis Academy, very good student. He's another kid that's going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan. So he's a name to keep an eye on. Don't know a ton about him just yet. I think we'll know a lot more about his interest this weekend from Notre Dame. There's two kids that I want to wrap up with, Ryan, and the first one is a guy that you guys look. There's certain guys I love finding these guys where Ryan starts watching the film and he starts getting really excited. And like when Ryan gets excited about film, it's fun because he gets animated. And so there's a kid that is coming in campus this weekend, kid named Jordan Young in the 2025 class. From Monroe High School in Monroe, North Carolina, that gets Ryan Roberts super fired up. And I had yet to see his film yet, Ryan. Like, I mean, I'm just now kind of dipping into the 25 class. You had already seen it. This is a really impressive young man and an elite student, by the way. Not just a good student, an elite student. So this is a big-time football player, Ryan. Big-time football player.
Another player, Brian, that's rated as a 3-star right now. And I'm like, I could not care less what this ranking says because this kid, 6 foot, about 175 pounds right now, safety. This kid's excellent, man. Like he's short area explosive, has some long speed to him, but his understanding of just where to attack at certain times. He has kind of that IQ and that understanding of the game that is incredibly rare for a player his age, right? So North Carolina kid, I think Notre Dame needs to get in on this kid very quickly because this kid, I believe, is going to blow up tremendously on the recruiting trail from a rankings perspective. He's just a really good football player. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame has only offered 5 safeties during the pot of gold. This was my favorite kid. And I think the kid that has the best range working from depth, the best ability to kind of give you variety as a pass coverage player, I think this kid has the goods. Jordan Young out of North Carolina.
Now I know that Rivals is the only group that ranks him. They rank him as a 4-star, number 195. The others haven't even taken the time to rank him yet. But here's the thing: Rivals ranked him. He jumped up. He was a 3-star previously, Ryan. He jumped up in their most recent rankings. They have him as a receiver, though. I think this kid he's a good receiver, but he is a special DB. Here's how I would say about his game. He's built a lot like Peyton Bowen was, but he plays a lot like Caleb Downs, in my opinion. Like very similar game. Not quite as thick as Caleb was, but he's explosive. He's fluid. Very, very high football IQ, Ryan. This kid is a legit playmaker. He can hit, and he can flat out run. This is a really good football player.
That's an interesting comparison to Caleb Downs.
Kid, Ryan, no doubt.
I believe so. Yeah, I really do believe so. And it's an interesting comparison a little bit to Caleb Downs because Caleb Downs had really nice physical attributes, but the thing that separated Caleb Downs was that he was so smart, man. Like he was just always in the right spot. And that's how I feel about Jordan Young, man. Like he's just always in the right spot. This is a ball hawk, right? And this is a ball hawk not because has incredible short area quickness, which he does. He breaks on the ball really well. But he just seems to always be jumping passing lanes because he's always in the right spot that he needs to be. And so this kid is a high priority player for me personally. You know, Notre Dame sees it that way. We'll see. Obviously, I think Notre Dame likes him a lot. Yeah. So we'll see. Obviously, as that relationship keeps building here. But he was the player of the safeties. There were a couple really nice safeties I thought Notre Dame offered, but this was my favorite one by far.
easily. And that's saying something because they offered some good safeties in the 25 class, Ryan. People that are frustrated about the safety depth, safety recruiting, it's understandable. This is the kind of kid to me that can change that in a hurry. Now,
Yes.
long way to go, I would imagine, with him, Ryan.
Yes.
But man, this kid can flat out play. This kid can flat out play.
And get in early, man, when the rankings are a little bit disrespectful to him, right? Like get in a little earlier there. So
well, and I mean, look, Ryan, the reality is that they've recruited the state of North Carolina better in recent years. They can point to kids from North Carolina that they've put in the NFL. The Aguara brothers obviously come to mind. They've had more and more success in the region, and they're going to play a lot more in that region. And so, you're talking about a kid, Ryan, that is going to have a chance to see Notre Dame play, and he's going to look at this upcoming season, for example, and he's going to say, hey, look, like I'm going to go to Indiana to play football, but these cats are coming to North Carolina twice, and they're going to play in South Carolina this year. Literally, Notre Dame's going to have 3 games, not just against teams from the Carolinas. They're going to have 3 games in the Carolinas where they're going to actually play in the Carolinas this year. They play at NC State, they play at Duke, and they play at Clemson, and then they have a home game against Wake Forest. So they're going to play 4 teams from the Carolinas, 3 of them there. That kid's going to see that and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to Indiana, but like, hey, these guys play all over. They're coming to my hometown, right? And so, those are things you look at, Ryan, and say those things help Notre Dame. They do.
Yes.
That's the way that schedule shakes out helps Notre Dame when it comes to these kind of things, because this is a big time football player, man.
You want to hear about disrespectful? His team put him at tight end. They hit him at tight end into the boundary in a 2x2 set, and they ran a tight end delay with him into the flat. Like,
a few times. Yeah, a few times.
So disrespectful.
Yeah, I'll say that though, Ryan. That's kind of stealing a page out of my own heart, because we played a team. I think it was against Ursinus when I was at Muhlenberg, and we had a little bit of fun with them. So we used a lot of 2-back sets. So my love of 2-back goes back to my coaching career, because we had an All-American running back in Matt Bernardo, but we had 2 other really good running backs, a kid named Mike Markerbrad, and then Mike McCurley was a freshman we had. It was pretty good. So what we did is we kind of went 21 personnel. We put Mike Markerbrad as the fullback, but he wasn't really blocking. We would use him out of the pass game. Well, one thing we did against Ursinus, and it's kind of not fair, but we lined up in an 11 personnel look and like a deuce look, right? So like twins to the left, we had tight end to the right, and a guy spread out. But we actually put Matt Bernardo, our All-American running back, at tight end. And so, because our tight end, Robbie Sherman, was like the big lumbering. He's a good tight end, but he was not a stretch the field type of tight end. And so we just sent Matt on a seam route for like a 75-yard touchdown. It was so not fair. So when I saw that, it kind of was like, okay, I like what they're doing there. Because
they highlighted a tight end for a second. I'm like, wait, did they sneak him in a tight end at 6 foot, 170 pounds? Yeah, they did.
They did. I dig it. So right now, Ryan, the Taylon Taylor, I'm curious about, because I know he had told you he was coming up this weekend. I'm curious if he's actually going to make it or not. But we're going to talk, since he told you like he's coming on campus,
right?
That he's coming on campus, that he is on campus. And I'm just going to say it right now. This guy is a straight up dude. He's a straight up dude. You're talking about a kid that's like 45 minutes west of Chicago, right? He's a Northern Indiana kid, very good student, and a dynamic wide receiver, Ryan. This is one of my 5 to 10 most important must gets in the 25 class. I would even argue, I think I said to you yesterday, and this is a bit hyperbolic, I think you could argue that he's the most important remaining receiver on Notre Dame's board, regardless of class, now that Cam Williams is in the class, just because of what it means to be able to get an impact player like this at that position, but also because of how important it is for Notre Dame to start putting really just a wall around the state of the state of Illinois, but more so the area of Chicago and the regions around it. They've got to be able to make that their home again. And if they can do that with the way that Chicago's trending in the right direction with football players, that would be very impactful.
Especially in 2025, when it looks like they have so many options in Illinois. Like we haven't talked about Nathaniel Marshall obviously today because he's not visiting, right? But we talked about Christopher Burgess, talked about a guy like a Taylon Taylor. I mean, there are more guys kind of, that are popping up in Chicago, especially in 2025. It's a really strong area in Illinois this year in 2025 So when that is a fact, Notre Dame needs to win it. Like there's no excuses there. When there is a substantial amount of talent in Illinois, Notre Dame needs to capitalize on that. They need to. You can't let this type of kid go to Ohio State. You can't let this type of kid leave the area. You can't let this type of kid get out of your backyard. You have to close on a guy like a Taylor Taylor, who is a guy that I think both of us are very high on already, and kind of looking forward to it, man. Like there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to be on this kid. There's no doubt about that. Getting in now, developing that relationship and saying, hey, buddy, you're an Illinois guy. We're in your backyard. And we were there from day one. We were there early for you, sir, when you were a sophomore in high school. Get in early with this type of kid and don't let him leave. Can't let him leave.
Yeah. It's early yet with his recruitment, but you're seeing it, Ryan. He's a dynamic. He can stretch the field vertically. He can make plays after the catch. He can do a little bit of everything. He's a really, really good football player. Really good football player. So that's the wrap up of recruiting, Ryan. So we're going to move on to the mailbag next. But before we do, I would ask y'all and kindly ask y'all to do us a favor and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, everybody, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast platform, we would love and greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And of course, as always, Ryan, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you have not done so, I'm telling you, you're missing out. You're absolutely missing out. You should be signed up for our message boards. No doubt about it. So Ryan, let's go over to the mailbag and we're just going to dive right in. Let's get after it. And we're going to start off here with Rob Osgood.
Rob's question, mailbag. I am hoping for a boot camp style spring ball. Basics. Get the basics down, then expand. Get the young guys ready.
Yep. And then he kind of goes on with this is where his question kind of comes into play.
Said, guys, in previous shows, you talked about the defensive line in depth. If you were the defensive line coach, what would be your rotation? What would your rotation look like with the defensive line?
I mean, that's kind of what we talked about at the beginning, though, Ryan, is I don't know what it would look like right now. I mean, guys need to be able to compete for those jobs. I mean, if I were to play a game right now, I would, because like you always have to start somewhere. You have to put 11 guys out the first time you take a team rep, right? You have to figure out who it is. And right now, first day of practice, I would go with Javonte Jean. Actually, you know what? I'd probably go with Nana Osafo-Mensah at big end because I wanted my returner to get that first crack at it. You're a newcomer, you got to beat him out. I'd go Nana Osafo-Mensah as my number one big end. I'd go Jordan Patel's my Viper, Riley Mills is my 3 technique, and Howard Cross is my nose. After that, I'd have Junior Tuihalamaka and Josh Burnham battling it out for the Viper rotation. I'd have Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Alexander Ahrensberger, and I'd throw Aiden Gilbira over there battling for filling that out. And then Gabriel Rubio is going to play because he played last year and got better and better as the season went on. You're going to see Jason Onye get a chance to compete for a job. You're going to see Donovan Heinrich. You're going to see Tyson Ford. There's somebody I'm missing off the top of my head, and a veteran interior guy, I believe. And
Howard Cross?
I already have him as a starter. But you need to see those guys battle and compete. But I mean, look, if I was the coach, what would the rotation look like? If I was the coach, I'm walking in there saying, hey, guys, there's nobody. We weren't good enough last year for anybody to feel like they've got a spot locked down. Everybody's got to earn it. Here's what the starting lineup, here's what the first depth chart's going to look like on day one. But I'm writing these in pencil, and I'm writing it lightly in pencil. Go compete. That's what I want. Marcus Freeman always talks about how it's about competition. Look, all the drills you want to do about competition don't mean a thing if players aren't actually able to compete for spots. That's the ultimate competition. When you talk about like non-game events, there's no greater thing that creates a culture of competition. Like, I don't care who the returning starter is, we're going to play the best guy. And everyone's going to get a chance to compete for that, especially in the spring. So that's where I want to be, Ryan. That's where I hope that they are. And that's where I would want to be if I was the D-line coach. That's for me.
Well, I mean, I think that interior defensive line is going to be the most interesting, in my opinion, as far as how it fills out, because kind of who your who your starters in theory are going to be, right? You have Howard Cross, obviously, inside. You have Riley Mills inside. After that, I mean, the next wave should be, in theory, Gabriel Rubio, and it should be, hopefully, a guy like Jason Onye is a guy that kind of steps to the forefront. After that, it's about Aiden Keanaaina getting back from his injury, getting more, getting opportunities, hopefully, at some point in the spring. And then it's Devin Houston is obviously the other guy inside that we know as an early enrollee will be in there. How quickly he asserts himself on the depth chart will be a conversation piece and something to kind of keep an eye on. But I think that you nailed it, Brian. For me, it's, that Viper position, especially Jordan Botelho, but you need guys like Joshua Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka to really make an impact in that Viper room. And then big ends, like Javante Jean-Baptiste is the known commodity on a college level perspective. But I'm really interested to see what Ahrensberger does this offseason, man. Like Alexander Ahrensberger is one of the toolsiest defensive linemen that you have on the roster. Like he has a lot of God-given ability. It's just about, hey, how are you able to assert yourself? Are you able to assert yourself? Are you able to take a step forward? Those questions that need to be answered. The only other player that I'm really interested in is Tyson Ford this spring, right? Like, is he a guy that sticks at big end? Is he a guy that plays a little bit inside? I'm interested to see where he ends up in the rotation perspective, because I can't really give that a great answer right now, Rob, honestly, because I don't know I don't know what his weight's up to right now, right? Like, I don't know how he's progressing in the weight room. I don't know what his body looks like right now. That's something that we'll obviously find out about over the next 24 hours.
Yep, absolutely. We got one here, Ryan. I'm going to read because it's a recruiting question for you to answer first. Wade Garrett says, where do you feel our recruiting is right now? Notre Dame's recruiting is right now compared to this time last year. Same momentum, better, or down a bit?
I mean, when you look at who's committed this time compared to what last year, it's very similar, Wade. It's just kind of flipped a little bit, right? Last year, the offensive class was a big question mark. Last year at this time, you had Cedric Irvin Jr. and you had Cooper Flanagan as the lone offensive commits. Defensively, you were like, oh man, we're cooking there, right? Like we got a lot of dudes, Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen. Like you felt really good about what the defensive class was at this point last year. This year, you feel really good about the offensive class, especially, right? Like you feel good about CJ Carr and Cam Williams and Peter Jones and Aeneas Williams. That's great. Defensively, there's guys that you get excited about for sure, like Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs and Owen Wafel inside. But there's more bigger question marks, I would say, on the defensive side of the ball. It's similar to what it was last year with the offensive side of the football. A lot of questions. So momentum-wise, I think offensively there's better momentum in a lot of spots than it was last year, in my opinion. You feel good about where you are. Defensively is the big question mark. Last year, defensively, you felt good about not only the state of the class, but also where you were trending with certain guys and where you were kind of moving forward. This year, I feel like it's just kind of a flipping, right? Like the momentum is on the offensive side of the football this year. It was on the defensive side of the football this time last year. And I think that for me, it's about, offensive class, I expect to fill up in a really good way. I think that offensive class is going to end up being very good. Defensively, you have question marks, and it has taken a step back as far as what the momentum was compared to last year. From Call Me Ty, says, what was the most interesting spring you can remember since you have been covering Notre Dame?
It was probably the one going into the 2018 season, Ryan, because I remember that spring and you saw like Chase Claypool really going off. You saw Miles Boykin really going off. A lot of the questions you had about that team started to get answered. How good are they going to be at safety? What's this Gilman kid from Navy going to do? Because he had missed the year before. He played as a freshman at Navy. Is he going to be an impact guy or not? Can he play? You start to see that spring like, yep, this guy can play. So I think that to me is that spring was really fun to watch because you're like, okay, this team's got a chance to be really good. Can Dexter Williams be that guy? Well, Tony Jones had a good spring that year too. Dexter had a good actually, I don't remember was Dexter suspended that spring or was it the fall? I think he might have been suspended that spring, or he had some issues that spring. And you're like, man, if this guy doesn't step up, he's going to be in trouble. Tony Jones has a good spring that year. You started to see that offensive line. You're like, man, what's this offensive line going to be like? I'm not really sure. Then you see like Liam Burke or Eichenberg really settling into a position. Alex Bars had a really good spring. So you kind of felt like the offensive line was going to be okay. So you just kind of watch this unit over time just evolve throughout the spring to where you felt going into 2018 like this team has a chance to be really good. And they built on that the season before where they went 10-3 and had their kind of the bounce back from 4-8, and then they went out and made the playoff. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily was like, oh yeah, they're definitely making the playoff, but you could look at them and say, this team's got a shot to be pretty good this year because you saw some guys really step up and emerge that hadn't. I mean, Liam Eichenberg is replacing a top 10 draft pick. That wasn't an easy deal. Aaron Banks is being tasked with stepping in and replacing a top draft pick. Alex Bars is now hey, you're now Q. You're the dude. And he was moving into, he was not no, actually he was staying at guard. He moved into guard the year before. But you have Tommy Kramer now battling for a spot. Robert Hainsey stepping into the lineup, right? So you started to see these guys really step up and make plays. And the only question mark at the time was quarterback. That was the big question mark. Is there a legitimate quarterback battle? Is it going to be Brandon Wimbush? Is it going to be in Book? But man, you started seeing the pieces around them really start to emerge in 2018, and you started feeling really good about what that team could have been. Got one. Here we go, Ryan.
From Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker, what coaching technique would you like to see Joe Rudolph do first with his offensive line that Harry Hiestand may have done that you think would benefit them? I mean, Brian, I think it's like
may not have done, yeah.
What he may have not have done. That's a completely different question then. I was going to say what I want similarly to be is to finish through the block through second level, right? Like you used to see Harry Hiestand's offensive lines in practice, and I only saw, a couple practice of them, but they used to not just drive defenders off the ball, but they would work to finish through the second level. So finishing blocks is a big one. But what he wasn't doing, I mean, I guess you talked about this a little bit though, Brian. Like you I think you said before, and sorry if I misquote you here, but I thought you said something that you thought Harry Hiestand's pass blocking offensive line, like on the offensive line, could have been a little bit better at times.
Better, yeah. Now it was better last year, but part of that was when you had really big time tackles, right? But yeah, I thought that was always an area that could have been improved. And again, we're talking about nitpicking something that's not as elite as the run blocking, right? But I thought they did a good job last year. But I mean, that's the thing. Just continue. It's what it is, Ryan. It's enhancing what's already been established. That's the nice thing that Joe Rudolph is stepping into. Dude, you don't have to fix something that's broken. Mm-hmm. He already did that. Harry already fixed what was broken. He already sealed up all the cracks and replaced what needed to be replaced. And it's all looking good. Now your job is to build on that, make it even better. And so I don't know if there's anything that I would say not to do. I would have rather talked about what you thought the question was, Ryan, which is he needs to continue building on just that power, that driving through that first line, working up to the second level, really getting that physical push in the run game, and making sure that you also can protect the quarterback. Those are the things that you need to focus on. But that's already been established, in my opinion.
I think communication's a big thing too, right? They continuing to evolve the combo blocks to the second level and to be able to communicate with one another. Because it's a very interesting relationship with offensive linemen when you're comboing, because there's a lot of unspoken conversations that happen, right? Where you're just you understand oh, he's got the leverage. Now I'm off, and now I can release and work to the second level. But that's also a different type of communication. That's body language, right? Yeah. Understanding when and when not to get off of a combo is very important, obviously. So I think just kind of that communication up front's a big thing as well.
Here's an interesting question here, Ryan, from Archer452.
Archer says, outside of Notre Dame, what other spring ball storylines are you following? I mean, I think national perspective is going to be talking a lot about the Texas quarterback battle, right? As far as the Ewers.
I think quarterback at large, right? I mean, look, if you think about it, there's the quarterback battles. There's a perceived competition at LSU, although look, you always say if a guy outplays him, but I mean, I thought Jane was pretty good last year.
Did they say that's a competition?
Some LSU guy did. I saw on Twitter once, but for me, Ryan, it's just so many top teams are going to have new quarterbacks this year. Alabama's going to have a new quarterback this year. Georgia's going to have a new quarterback this year. Ohio State's going to have a new quarterback this year. Clemson's going to have a new quarterback this year. Georgia, I think I said Georgia already, but there's a lot of teams. TCU is going to have a new quarterback this year. So there's a lot of teams. Penn State's going to have a new quarterback this year. There's just a lot of guys that are a lot of top teams that are just going to have new quarterbacks this year. How do they do? And then does that change at the top of quarterback allow some teams that maybe weren't quite top teams but have veteran quarterbacks coming back, like Washington, USC? Can they take advantage? LSU in the West, can they take advantage of their continuity and dynamic ability at quarterback to take advantage of the fact that these other teams are not? So for example, LSU has a huge opportunity this year. They beat Bama last year. They won the West. Alabama hasn't not won the West 2 years in a row in forever. Right. Can they be the team that knocks them off that pedestal and take advantage of the fact that, hey, yes, you have to go to Tuscaloosa, but you return a quarterback situation that's really dynamic, whereas Alabama's a little iffy at quarterback right now. That's a big storyline for me. Can Auburn find a quarterback? Who's going to be, Ole Miss has a new quarterback this year. He's Notre Dame. How's the transfer quarterback portal going to impact the college football? Is Spencer Sanders that missing ingredient for Ole Miss last year Ole Miss had a couple games last year, Ryan, where, you thinking for a couple quarters, like, hey, they got a shot to win this game. And then all of a sudden, they'd fade in the second half. And honestly, a big part of that was quarterback play. I still believe Ole Miss beats Alabama if their quarterback play wasn't so bad. Same with Mississippi State, so they go from 8-5 to maybe 10-3, 11-2, just like that if their quarterback play is better. But is Spencer Sanders that guy? That I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. That's the question mark. That's what you're recruiting them to be, though. So there's some really interesting quarterback storylines just throughout college football. And then there's the other things like, the Pac-12 race is good. Look, it may not get the national attention, but the Pac-12 race this year with USC, Washington, Oregon, Utah, UCLA, Oregon State is going to be fun to watch. It is. And part of it is what? They're all returning quarterbacks from last year, except for Oregon State. And you know how bad their quarterback play was last year? DJ Uiagalelei is an upgrade for them. That's how bad their quarterback play was last year.
Significant upgrade, too.
Significant upgrade. That's how bad their quarterback play was last year, Ryan. So, it's just so fast. And then here's the thing. Look, Georgia, you got a chance to do something that, have we ever seen – when was the last time we saw I'm curious, what's the most consecutive – and I'm typing this national championships that we've seen in college football? Have we ever seen teams win three? Minnesota and Yale are the only three straight undisputed title winners. Princeton, see here, I'm trying to, and I think Minnesota did that a long time ago. So here we go. Princeton did it in the 1870s. Yale did it in the 1880s. They won 5 in a row. And then 3 in a row from 86 to 88. Michigan did it from 1901 to 1904. The last time it was done, Ryan, was 1934 to 1936. So last time a team won 3 titles in a row. Can Georgia and that streak, do they become even a more dominant version of what Bama was than what Bama was? Or do they kind of start getting a little bit too big for their britches? Or maybe they have the right attitude, but you've lost a ton of talent over a 2-year stretch. And that's where you can sometimes, like, it wasn't the first year we were able to handle it, but it was the second year we had another mass exodus of guys going to the NFL that drew us back. But of course, they've recruited incredibly well in that time period. So there's just a lot of stuff like that, Ryan, that makes me, wonder, how Georgia's going to be. And not even wonder like, oh, I don't think they're going to be good. Just wonders in like, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm just really curious to see what they're going to do this year. And so it's going to really be fascinating. Does Tennessee take a jump or do they take a little bit of a step back? Again, since some of these coaches going into year 2, like Marcus Freeman and Billy Napier and some of those guys take a jump in year 2, it's going to be fun. And then of course, it's the last year of the Big 12 for Texas and Oklahoma. How's that dynamic? That's going to be an interesting storyline all year. How badly do all those Big 12 teams just want to punish? I'll tell you what, if those teams get behind, you're going to see people running that score up on them this year. But they may not be able to. They may just be too good. How does Brent Venables do in year 2? Part of that year 2 thing, right? So I'm excited about this season because there's just so many intriguing storylines. Here's one. Is Matt Rule going to finally be the coach to get Nebraska back on track?
He's brought in some intriguing transfers this offseason, by the way. There's a couple of guys on the roster number. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to be a year 1 fix, right? Like maybe they can get to a bowl game. I don't know what the future holds, obviously. Right, but
they're not going to win a title this year, but if they go win 8-9 games this year, it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's just going to be a fun year, man. I think it's going to be a really fun year. And of course, there's a Notre Dame. What kind of damage is Iowa going to do? Because they added 2 really good weapons to their offense for them this offseason. So it's going to be fascinating. Very, very fascinating. And I want to get a bonus in my contract that if I produce mediocre results, that I get a bonus like Brian Ferentz got in his contract. right? What if they got to score like
only
25 points
only
again? And he gets
25 a
bonus?
game in college game,
Yeah,
man.
good
It's
break.
very
Yeah, exactly. You always say you shouldn't get rewarded for doing your job,
yes.
and but like that's not even that. That's not even doing your job well. That's just like showing up. I mean, 25 points a game for a Power 5 team. Come on, man.
It's gross, man.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. It is what it is. Let's get to some more here.
Quarterback
Ryan.
development was so bad that we're like so excited about Cade McNamara being the
Yes,
quarterback at
for real. You're not joking. You're just you're not joking at all. Here's a question, Ryan. I'm going to ask you from Josh Buffo, the motivational business maker. What freshman defensive player can Notre Dame plug into this defense that would make them scary fast at all levels?
What Notre Dame freshman defensive player? Man, that's Josh, that's a tough one, man, because I think that for me, like, I mean, my immediate response was in my mind, I was thinking like Jay Nosberry at Roper,
That was my first
right?
thought,
Like
yeah.
that's the one, because it's like every other spot, it's like, Christian Gray, I think, could play a lot as a freshman if you needed him to, but like, is he an upgrade over Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison in year one? Like, I doubt that, obviously, right? But then there's other spots where it's like, year 2, year 3 is going to be when Boubacar Traore is potentially that guy, most likely, right? That's going to be when Brendan Vernon is that guy. So are they going to be able to do that year 1? Probably not. But I think Jay Nosberry is the one, man, where like, if that rower position is really up for conversation, and let's say that he has a fantastic spring and he figures into that conversation in the fall, I think he could be a dynamic weapon in that spot.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. But I think they have speed. It's just Maris Lufau can run. He doesn't always know where he's running to. So, that's kind of a bigger thing for me. Okay. Here's another one from Archer.
Archer says, would you like to see a spring college football season for backups freshmen? Make it shorter season, 6 to 8 games, and don't count it towards their eligibility, but give young guys reps and more games for fans.
No, I don't want to see that at all. It's a money maker at all. We don't need to see games in the spring, right? I mean, here's what I want to see. I wouldn't mind seeing them have some opportunities for freshman and redshirt freshman practices, kind of like what we would see at some of the Division III schools. Mount Union used to do this. I don't know if they still do. I would imagine they still do. But they would have 2 practices, and it would be like because at the Division III level, a lot of those private small schools, the football team is the driver of male population in the school, right? So you'd bring in, like, I think my last year at Defiance, we brought in like 75 freshmen. That's at a place like Defiance. I mean, Wittenberg and Mount, you're bringing in like 100 freshmen a year. And so you'd have like literally like freshman practice, because you can't coach 200 some kids. So you'd have a freshman practice. What I would like to see them do is to have like almost like a mini camp for the young guys. Give them like 5 non-padded practices, helmets only, where you're able to go out there and take your freshmen and redshirt freshmen that did not like surpass eligibility last season, and say you're going to give them like 5 non-padded practices before spring camp starts to help them kind of get acclimated, go over stuff and just do things like that. I would love to see something like that. But as far as a full spring, no, I wouldn't want to. I don't want to see a full spring.
It'd be tough to also, marry the conversation of like, because you want those younger guys to also be around the team, right, for the spring, and to be, competing on a day-to-day basis. I feel like if you get into the scheduling of an alternative schedule, that like takes away from team time, right, from coaches' time, and to be able to really develop those, because that's one thing that I think we underrate about spring. It's not, yes, it's about guys getting better and starting to figure out roles and, that kind of that baseline, but it's also like players developing relationships with one another, right? And to be able to become a team, like that's kind of where that baseline starts as well. So yeah, I think that's I think it would just be a little hard to manage a full schedule on top of trying to get them acclimated to being a part of a football team as well for the fall.
Right. You got time for 2 more, Ryan? And then we'll be done with this. We'll be out of here. Here's one from Tyler Smith. I'm going to ask this, Ryan, because I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yep.
Tyler asks, do you guys think Tommy Tremble could have been a Michael Mayer if Brian Kelly would have worked with him more? Don't think I've ever seen a better blocker at tight end than Tommy.
Well, I mean, Tommy was a better blocker than Michael Mayer. Like, there's no doubt about that. I think that the biggest thing that we underrate with Michael Mayer is that his physical traits aren't incredible, right? Like he's got good though lateral quickness, he's got good hip flexibility, he's got good straight line speed, but nothing about Michael Mayer physically is truly elite. The thing though about Michael Mayer is that he's so natural at so many things, right? It's like plucking the football is just easy for him. Going up and maintaining body control is easy for him. Like there's just so much natural, like just easiness to how he plays football. And I just don't think Tommy was just quite as natural of a football player as what Michael Mayer is. That's no shot at him because Michael Mayer is one of the best that we've ever seen at the position in Notre Dame history, right? But I think that for me, I don't think that he would have quite gotten to Michael's level. Would he have gotten better and more productive in the passing game? For sure. But I don't think that he would have gotten to that level because I just don't think he's quite as natural at some things as Michael is.
Well, he's not as big. He doesn't catch the ball as well.
Yep.
And he's faster than Michael was, but I mean, Michael was just a better all-around player.
Yeah.
Tommy Tremble should have been used more.
Agreed.
Part of the reason Tommy wasn't used more was Tommy. I mean,
yes,
he didn't have the focus as a young person that Michael Mayer had. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, but he should have still been used better and more effectively. But part of the reason that he wasn't used more is because as last year there, they had Michael Mayer, you know what I mean? Who was, as a freshman, a better pass catcher than Tommy Tremble was. My issue was never that Michael shouldn't have been number one. My issue is that they shouldn't have stopped throwing Tommy to Tremble the ball once Michael became the one. They should have used them both. That was more of my issue. And then here's the last one, Ryan, and we'll get out of here after this.
From Archer, I know you guys have talked about the lack of depth and quality in the 2024 class across the board. What position is the deepest? Cornerback and safety both seem pretty solid.
I would not view safety as deep.
I think tight end's pretty deep in my opinion. Yes. So I think tight end's very deep.
O-line's pretty deep. Interior O-line is very deep. I don't think tackle is as deep as the inside.
Sure.
Running back, to me, is the deepest position on the roster. Like it is. Quarterback all of a sudden became very deep. I mean, Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchey are battling for the number 3.
I thought he was talking about recruiting. Am I wrong here? I thought he was talking about recruiting. I could be wrong.
Class. Oh yeah, sorry, I read that wrong. That's my bad. 24 class, Ryan. Tight end is deep. I'm trying to think. Receivers very.
My receiver's very deep.
Yeah. I mean, the linebacker, we're just talking offers. They've offered 1 million linebackers and defensive linemen. I don't think the linebacker class is very good.
No.
It just, for me, it's just not. It's not very good. Cornerback class, I think it's a pretty good cornerback class, Ryan. I think it's a pretty deep. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of stars yet, like really elite guys. I haven't seen a lot of those yet, but it's a lot of good. There's a lot of Leonard Moores and John Mitchells and Jeremiah Newcombs and guys like that. There's a lot of that at corner this year.
Safety's very good. I agree with Archer on that one.
Yes. I said no because I was thinking of the team.
Yes.
But recruiting wise, it's a great safety class. Again, is there anyone as good as Caleb Downs? I haven't seen that guy yet.
Don't think so.
Yeah. But it's a really deep safety year. I mean, people are upset they missed out on and I get it. I'm frustrated too, but there's still some dudes on the board. I've said this before. If you give me a 3-man class of Jalen McClain and Kennedy Urlacher and Davis Andrews, Ryan, I'm happy. You know, and I would even consider a 4-man class now that Brandon Hillman's out of the class and, give me Marquise Gallegos as my 3rd or 4th safety. And again, that's a darn good safety class. Is it elite? No, it's not elite, but I'm going to have a pretty good football team if that's my safety rotation. And love to get DeJuan Lane. He's not coming to Notre Dame. He's not interested in Notre Dame. It's just not there yet. It's unfortunate, but just the reality. So
Jalen McClain, baby. All votes ahead.
We'll see. Ryan, I know you got to run. I am going to wrap up, but we did get a super chat here. So I'm going to read that from Michael S. and then we'll get out of here. So Michael S. asked, why did the Notre Dame defensive line perform so poorly against the run at USC? Scheme, talent, other. I think a lot of it was scheme. I mean, number one, they didn't wrap up really well. I think the bigger issue was the linebacking core against USC was a much bigger issue for me. And so when I look at that game, they did a lot more 3-man fronts, and some of the 4-man fronts were not real aggressive. The linebackers were bailing. They were basically giving USC the run in that game. They were almost daring USC to run, which to me just it wasn't the way to go. I thought they should have been more aggressive. I mean, honestly, Michael, I thought they should have turned the D-line more loose. I think that was an issue, that they didn't turn the D-line more loose. Some of most of the success they had was because the D-line was able to get penetration and pressures. I think the linebacker play and the overall scheme, it was too passive. They didn't let the defensive line attack. They left way too many just gaping holes that they just couldn't fill because of some of the stunts and stuff they were doing. And USC was really smart in how they went about it. I just think Lincoln Riley outcoached Al Golden that game. It's just simple as that, in my opinion. So yeah, I that's kind of where I'm at. So that is going to do it. We're going to wrap up right there. Folks, before you hit the road and leave us, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. Make sure you tune in tonight at 6:00 to the Ivy Nation Sports Talk. They're going to have Tariq Bracy on the show tonight, talking about his NFL draft prep and some other things. So that'll be a cool interview. Tariq's a really good kid. So you're definitely want to check that out. So make sure that you give that a view tonight. If you have not done so, hey, folks, please sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You are really going to like what we got going on there. Make sure you are definitely, if listening to a podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it as well. If you want to check out our free content at irishbreakdown.com, you can sign up for the daily newsletter at the bottom of the, you'll find that in the description box below as well, along with a lot of our other links, including the link to our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So have a great rest of your day, folks, and we will talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.